You're listening to WIN, Workers Independent News, a production of Diversified Media Enterprises. I'm Doug Cunningham. An historic decision by the NLRB regional director in Tucson, Arizona on the employment status of Tucson taxi drivers means thousands of taxi drivers around the country could be newly eligible for union representation. The Office of Professional Employees International Union assisted the Tucson Hacks Association in winning this ruling. Mel Schwartzwald is OPEIU's general counsel.
We believe it means a great deal not only to these drivers, but to many cab drivers across the country. What the regional director has done is said that taxi cab drivers are really employees rather than independent contractors.
While this could be appealed by the employer, Schwartzwald says that Tucson cab drivers can still move forward.
The next step here would be to have an election to see if they want to be represented by the Tucson Hacks Association. And that should shortly be scheduled by the regional director. It is possible that that election could be delayed with an appeal process, but that depends in part on what the employer does. But there should be a vote fairly soon.
The NLRB ruling is the first of its kind for taxi drivers. The Labor Board this year in the FedEx Home Delivery Incorporated decision and the Browning Ferris Industries case has been redefining what constitutes employees versus independent contractors. Workers continue to be on the march at the Port of Long Beach. Long Beach City Councilwoman Lena Gonzalez joined striking port truck drivers on the picket line at Long Beach Container Terminal. Amazon warehouse workers picketed and rallied in Long Beach on Thursday as well. Misclassification of employees as contractors and wage theft are among the main issues in strikes that are continuing at the ports of Long Beach and Los Angeles. UAW GM workers are taking a look at the details of the tentative new labor contract as they prepare to vote on whether or not to ratify it. All the workers will get $8,000 bonuses upon ratification. Traditional higher wage UAW members will get 3% wage raises in the first and third years, 4% lump sums in the second and fourth. Lower wage in progression members will get raises on a path to traditional wages. Workers with 3 or more years at GM will get to the full traditional wage of approximately $29 an hour by the end of this 4-year contract. The UAW says it won $1.9 billion in new investments in U.S. plants on top of the $6.4 billion announced earlier this year. UAW President Dennis Williams says it's up to the workers now to approve or disapprove this deal.
As with every negotiation process, our members makes the final decision, and we look forward to the discussion ahead.
Workers Independent News is brought to you with support from union-owned, union-represented Bank of Labor. Bank of Labor has provided trust and fiduciary services to labor organizations for nearly a century. Online at bankoflabor.com.
You've been listening to WIN, Workers Independent News. For more information, visit laborradio.org.
It's time for the Rick Smith Show.
I want you to get up now. I want all of you to get up out of your chairs. I want you to get up right now and go to the window, open it, and stick your head out and yell, "I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not going to take this anymore!"
I don't want to abolish government. I simply want to reduce it to the size where I could drag it into the bathroom and drown in the bathtub.
You bet I cut the taxes at the top.
How dare you? How dare you? Go ahead, make my day.
The Rick Smith Show starts now.
West side people don't surrender. They bring down, but they still rise on. Oh, and this time is my time. All right, love or hate, it don't matter. 'Cause I'm gonna stand and fight. This time is my time. She got her ups and downs, but love or hate, it don't matter. 'Cause this is my town.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks for being here today on the big program. Lots of things to get to, lots to talk about on this Friday as we head into the weekend before the big election here in Pennsylvania. Remember, check the calendar, tie a ring around your finger, whatever you've got to do to remember Tuesday, November the 3rd. Don't let anyone tell you that they've moved it to the 1st this year, or it's gonna happen on Wednesday this year. Tuesdays were just too difficult. We've rescheduled. Don't buy it. First Tuesday of the month, November the 3rd this year, is when you go to cast your ballot. And this major historic moment in Pennsylvania history for our voting friends here in Pennsylvania, first time in the history of Pennsylvania as part of the United States, going to seat 3 Supreme Court justices. This huge, enormous. We use some of the Donald Trump words: huge, big, really just amazing. A great opportunity, honestly. And this is how we make sure that we get sane, rational, reasonable, democratic ideals into our redistricting. None of the caricatures, none of the Rorschach tests, none of the where the heck did you get that from? Actually, maybe, encouraging the idea of competitive races. Good for democracy, good for the Commonwealth of PA, and I argue good for the nation. So I hope you've got it marked on the calendar. I hope it's there so that you get out and you vote on November the 3rd. Simple stuff. I'm going to talk a little bit about that today. Also, the minimum wage increase, which, you read the polling and the vast majority of the people want it. The vast majority of the people want a lot of things. You talk to working people in this country and they want to see a livable wage. They want to see workers who have reasonable health security and reasonable retirement security at the end of the road. And as we talked about yesterday, and this is one of those, looks like what you want and what you get are two different things. As we talked about yesterday, you've got the top 100 CEOs in this country. The top 100 CEOs with massive, enormous hordes of retirement cash, while the vast majority of workers have nothing. In fact, the top 100, and this stat just stopped me dead in my tracks. The top 100 CEOs in this country have as much retirement savings as the bottom 41% of this country. Over 116 million people, workers. And you go, what? How is that possible that you have this massive gap in the wealthiest country in the world? How do you have this massive gap? And the reality is it comes back to that bargaining power that workers don't seem to have anymore. And I got a number of emails from folks last night in talking about the study that we focused on yesterday, the Institute of Policy Studies study that came out that said, you know what, they're sitting on about $5 billion, about $5 billion that we helped subsidize because, of course, that stuff isn't taxed. But on average, about almost $50 million per CEO in the top 100. Which would generate, just in your basic annuity, almost $280,000 each and every month. About 16 times what Obama will get when he leaves office. Now, according to the General Accountability Office, almost 30% of the folks across this country, 55 and older, almost 30%, almost 1 in 3 have nothing. Nothing. So you're looking at almost a third, almost 30% of the country, nothing. Zip, zilch. And the guy and this is one of those moments that you can't not look at this and go, something seriously wrong here. The guy who has the most, and I guess you can go back to the 80s when I was a kid and you heard a lot of the one who dies with the most toys wins. This guy, I guess, wins. David Novak is his name. He's the executive chairman of Yum Brands. And for those who don't know, Yum Brands, they're Pizza Hut, that's KFC, Taco Bell. I think they own a couple of other ones. I'm not 100%, but that's the big ones. He's sitting on a massive retirement golden parachute, sitting on a huge egg, a golden egg, if you will, worth $234 million. In fact, monthly retirement payments of about $1.3 million each and every month. So the other 99, and this is another one of those moments where the 99% are looking at the 1%, go, wait a minute, you. Even in that world, even that rare stratified air at the very top, you've got this massive gulf between, well, the have, him, one, and everybody else. $234 million retirement golden egg. Now, what the interesting part of this is Yum Brand employs, a lot of part-time workers and a lot of folks. 537,000 people they claim to employ worldwide. 537,000 people. Of those 537,000 in 41,000 restaurants, they have just 8,823 of its employees who have any money in a 401k plan. That's their filings with the Department of Labor. I didn't make that up. Neither did the folks with the Institute of Policy Studies. Didn't make it up. Came out of their filings. Now, the question is, how much is in those 401k? We don't know. They could all be, could have $1 in it. And the one guy who has 234 million took it all. I don't know. But I look at this, when you have 537,000 people and less than 9,000 have pensions, and the one guy at the top has more than everybody, there's a problem. Pretty much of a problem. You think about this for a second. 537,000 workers in 41,000 stores, the vast majority of them, the overwhelming majority, low-wage workers who are asking taxpayers to subsidize them with health benefits, chip for their children, health benefits for themselves, food stamps, you name it, down the list. These are people who go to work each and every day and are demonized by right-wing politicians who won't raise the minimum wage and who won't help increase their bargaining power to be able to demand higher wages. No, can't do that. We'll just demonize them because they didn't get an education or they didn't do. It's a job. They're working. They're doing what they're told. They played by the rules and they're getting screwed by the rules. And what I'm saying is at some point we've got to wake up and go, wrong. We need change, and we need it now. And we need to be holding the politicians accountable that have allowed this to happen. And I would argue have even fostered this kind of situation. And I guess I'm just stuck on the massive gulf in the richest country in the world, where you have 100 people who have more retirement security than, well, the vast majority of people, but more in actual wealth than 116 million people. 100 people I can fit into my house. 116 million, that's a bigger lift. And what's infuriating is you look at these billion-dollar special exemptions that they get for deferred compensation plans that, helps the bottom line for them, but not for their workers. Now, did I mention that Yum Brand claims they offer a 401k for their employees? And I want you to think about this for a second. You're making minimum wage, $7.25 an hour. PA, it's $7.15 is what our law is, but we have to pay the federally mandated $7.25. So here in Pennsylvania, the minimum wage for workers, $7.25. How many people have disposable income, 6% of their disposable income to put into a retirement account? I would argue very few of them. Maybe the handful of pimply-faced teenagers that were told rule the roost of the minimum wage world. Not true, but we're told that often. I got an idea that maybe we should be clawing back some of the tax dollars that we've given for executive compensation and executive retirement packages. Maybe we should be rethinking how we're subsidizing this with tax breaks. Just kind of a thought. As was pointed out, Fortune 500 CEOs have $3.2 billion in special tax deferred compensation accounts that are exempt from the annual contribution limits imposed on ordinary 401ks. So we're giving these folks another tool to hoard, another tool to enrich themselves that we get to help chip in on. The report also points out in 2014, these CEOs saved $78 million on their tax bills by putting $197 million more into their tax-deferred retirement accounts. That doesn't work for you and me. And you look at this stuff, and at some point, and I'm hoping that this opens eyes. And especially in this election year, the hope is that we begin paying attention to what we've allowed to be created around us while they're telling us, no, we can't raise the minimum wage, and no, we can't have health care and retirement security for workers. At some point, I think we wake up. And it's this kind of egregious, ridiculous, outrageous kind of retirement things that you just go, wow, how did it get so screwed up? And how do we change it? To me, that's the most important part. And I think the business community is where we start. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to talk to a business owner who advocates for workers making a livable wage. Quick break, right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1986. That was the day that Edward Meese gave a speech to the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. Meese was serving as Attorney General under President Ronald Reagan. During his speech, Meese encouraged bosses to spy on their employees in order to determine if they were using drugs. He said management also has to take responsibility for surveillance of problem areas such as locker rooms, parking lots, shipping and mail room areas, and even the nearby taverns if necessary as part of controlling this problem. He also advocated for drug testing of employees. Ronald Reagan had declared what he termed the war on drugs in 1982. Meese was outlining a plan to make the workplace a battlefront of that war. During his speech, he said, "The workplace is the strategic pass-through which almost all Americans move. Consequently, the workplace can be a choke point on this use or misuse of illegal drugs." After the speech, a spokesman for Meese assured the press that the Attorney General was not advocating for bosses to infringe on the civil liberties of their employees. Many workers and unions have disagreed with that assessment. Since 1987, drug testing by employers has risen more than 250%. In 1987, the National Labor Relations Board ruled that drug testing was a mandatory subject of bargaining. By all accounts, Reagan's war on drugs had little success in stopping drug use. In 2005, 82% of polled police and sheriffs called the war a failure. However, the war on drugs has handed a resounding victory to corporate special interests like drug testing companies and privatized prisons. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com.
This is the Media Matters Minute. I'm Eric Wustewald. On Fox News' The Real Story, White House correspondent Ed Henry promoted a debunked claim by GOP presidential hopeful Carly Fiorina. Here's Henry pushing Fiorina's claims.
Carly Fiorina, one of the Republican candidates, of course, is not buying that at all, that the economy is better under Democrats. She has a Wall Street Journal op-ed saying, in part, quote, while Mrs. Clinton touts her gender to bolster her campaign, 92% of the jobs lost during Mr. Obama's first term belong to women. So you see the Republican pushback on this claim that the economy does better under Democrats.
CNBC moderators allowed Fiorina to make this false claim during the third Republican presidential debate. The following morning, CNN's Allison Camerota held her accountable for her inaccurate statement on CNN's New Day, calling it, quote, a recycled talking point from the Mitt Romney campaign that they deemed as false. In 2012, PolitiFact rated a similar claim as mostly false when it was promoted by then Republican presidential candidate Mitt Romney. For more on this and other stories, please visit MediaMatters.org.
Chances are, when you took a shower this morning, an AFSCME member made sure that water was clean. When you drove to work, an AFSCME member maintained the road. When you rode an elevator, an AFSCME member inspected it. I'm David Philman, Executive Director of AFSCME Council 13, the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees. AFSCME members enforce regulations, keep prisoners behind bars, take care of patients, protect the environment, and more. The work isn't glamorous, the salaries aren't high, but AFSCME members serve the public in every aspect of our daily lives. Chances are, you'll never see that AFSCME member working in a sewage plant, diving underwater to repair a bridge, or answering a 911 call. But aren't you glad they do? For more information, visit AFSCME13.org. We are AFSCME.
Minimum wage. Yeah!
You know what it means when they pay you minimum wage? You know what they're trying to tell you is like, hey, if I could pay you less, I would.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. So as I understand, Senator Tartaglione has pushed forward her $10 an hour plan, and I hear my Republican friends losing their mind going, if we raise the wage, we'll lose millions of jobs. It'll be the end of low-wage employment, which is ridiculous. And there have been a number of studies out there that show almost the opposite, that we will create a small number of jobs just because of the economic activity out there. But the frame that we repetitively hear, and we hear it ad nauseum, is it's going to hurt small business. It's going to kill them. And small business should be opposed to it. Which is why I've asked Mark Bortman. He is a small business owner. Exact Solar, the name of the company. They do solar system installations out on the eastern part of the state. And I thought it'd be a great opportunity to talk to Mark about why he and his company support increasing the minimum wage. Mark, thanks for taking time for us.
Rick, thanks for having me.
So, we hear this frame quite often that small business is going to be killed. You're just going to be decimated when they raise that wage, even a little bit. I don't think it's true, but I'm curious your thoughts.
Well, I don't think it's true at all. Sure, we're going to end up paying a little bit more in wages, but we're going to end up with a higher quality workforce. We're going to save in less turnover and less training costs because we won't be hiring new employees all the time. And we're going to give better service to our customers because our workers are going to be happier, healthier, and be able to concentrate on their jobs rather than worrying how they're going to pay their bills.
Yeah, but what about the bottom line? What about at the end of the day? What about the bottom of it?
Well, what I'm saying is, it helps our bottom line not to pay our employees minimum wage. Would rather pay our employees a fair wage so they can make their ends meet. So that way they can concentrate on business when they're at work and not have to worry about where they're gonna how their bank account is going to fare to be able to get to work.
No,
by paying them a little bit more, they can get to work. They don't have to worry about other things, and they can concentrate on work at work. And they're not always going to be on the lookout to find another job that might pay them a little bit more.
That's a good point. But let me ask you this, because what we're told quite often is especially my business centric friends who say labor is just a negative on the balance sheet. That's their problem, not ours. It's kind of that mentality of we care about our business and we got to run the business and we're going to control costs and do all that stuff. And it's just a balance. It's just a balance sheet issue. We'd love to pay more, but we just can't afford it.
Well, I think they're a little bit short-sighted, or they need to widen their vision a little bit. Sure, labor cost is an item on the balance sheet, but it's not just a cost. Your workers are not just a cost; they're a valuable asset for your company too. And by having the right employees, we're able to provide better service to our customers, and so it ends up as a net positive for us.
And maybe at some point they put solar panels on their house. And it's good for your business because it regenerates business, right?
Sure. Well-paid employees end up being good customers, either for your business or someone else's business, and it all comes around and goes around.
Yeah, but here's the thing. I can't imagine that your business friends, your friends at the Chamber of Commerce, all that thrilled with you taking this position because it's antithetical to what everybody else in their room must be saying, right?
Well, certainly different business owners have different views on it, but I try and convince them that paying a higher wage you end up with better employees, less turnover, so it ends up helping the bottom line rather than hurting it.
Now, help me with my premise, because this is one of these situations that I talk about often with a number of my business owner friends. I don't know any small businesses that pay minimum wage. None of the people that I know who hire people, they may have 1, 2, 5, 10 employees. None of them pay minimum wage. The people who seem to pay the minimum wage most often are these huge conglomerates, the fast food folks, the Yum brands, if you will.
Sure.
Those seem to be the folks that we're protecting by not raising the minimum wage. Am I off on this, do you think?
No, I don't think so. I don't talk to a lot of my business owner friends about the actual wages that they pay their customers, but certainly when we're interviewing people, people are not that are coming from other small businesses are not expecting to be paid minimum wage. I do think you're right. I think it's the Walmarts of the world and the other big companies that are holding things down.
Because, I look at you and myself, when I hire people and I have people work for me, I have to look them in the face. I have to sit next to them and know that, they're struggling to pay the rent. They're struggling to put food on their table. And I don't want to be that guy.
I agree with you. Not only do I not want to be that guy, but I know it's better for me to not be that guy, to have an employee that wants to come work and knows that they're going to be paid fairly because it's going to translate into better work.
Exactly. And to me, this kind of conversation has to be had daily, I think, because we have to go back to that idea that all work is valued, all work is important, and that all work should be rewarded with the ability to, at the minimum, exist and survive and lead something of a normal life in this country.
I agree, definitely.
So how do we get to that point, Mark? Because you look at it seems like there's an entire political party dead set against it, and portions of the other political party who are not all that thrilled. How do we get this pushed forward and that idea moved on?
That's an excellent question. I think it's going to take political pressure from all walks of life, from all stripes, to move the issue forward. I think the majority of the American people is in favor for a higher minimum wage. As you mentioned before, I think the economic studies have shown that higher minimum wages are good for everyone. So it's going to take political pressure from across the board to get it to move.
What do you say to the person who goes, well, Rick or Mark, if we needed higher wages, the free market would do it. That, you're paid what you're worth. You've heard that argument, right?
Sure. I think not just in wages, but I think in a lot of different things, the free market doesn't work 100% as it should. And I think that's why there is a government. And I think the government does have a role to play in certain areas. And I don't see any problem with the government trying to set a fair minimum wage, so that way everyone can get on a level playing field.
There you go.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, so that we base competition, because I think competition is a very good thing, very healthy thing, but it depends on what you're competing on. If we're competing on who's the smartest, who's the most productive, who makes the best widget, who's the most inventive, that's great. But if we're competing on who can we cheat out of wages and whose family can we make struggle the most, I don't think that's good for individuals or society.
I agree with you, definitely. And I think the evidence bears that out.
So what do you think we should be doing? I mean, do you think the political realm is where this has to happen, or is it on the ground that makes our politicos go forward?
Oh, I think it's definitely a combination of the two. It's the general people, the general populace are the bosses of the people in office, so they need to get their voices heard. I know that there's an online petition, the Businesses for a Fair Minimum Wage website that I've signed, and a lot of other business people have signed. I've been in contact with our state and local representatives and senators, and so it's just going to take pressure from all sides to get it to move forward.
Do you think it's going to happen?
Yes, I think it will happen. I think Governor Wolf is in favor of it. And I think with pressure from around the state, I think it will happen.
I'm hoping you are correct. You're listening to the Rick Smith Show. We're here with Mark Bortman. He's the head chief cook and bottle washer over at Exact Solar. They install solar systems onto people's homes and businesses and all of that stuff. You want to check out their website, exactsolar.com. We've also got a link at thericksmithshow.com. Just click on Mark's name. It'll take you right there. I did want to talk to you a bit about what's going on here in Pennsylvania with the solar industry. And sadly, this has got to be a tough time for you. Given the crisis of the last couple of years, that our General Assembly has done nothing to fix the SREC credit problem that's going on here in the Commonwealth.
That's true. We call it the solar coaster. There's definitely been some ups and downs in the solar industry in the state. I think there are some easy fixes that the state legislature could put in place to help support the SREC market, and that would really support a lot of jobs in the state in this growing industry. As I mentioned to you, we're located in the eastern part of Pennsylvania, right on the border with New Jersey. And there's a huge difference in the market between Pennsylvania and New Jersey, because New Jersey's had the support and their SREC market has stayed steady. Whereas in Pennsylvania, the SREC market has crashed, and that's really slowed things down for the industry.
Give me an example of the difference just by crossing the border of what the SREC credits are, so people have an understanding of exactly what we're talking about.
Sure. Well, so SRECs are solar renewable energy credits. Those are certificates that you earn for producing electricity from a renewable resource, such as solar panels. In Pennsylvania right now, each SREC is worth around $15. In New Jersey, they're worth around $230. The big difference is that in New Jersey, the SREC market, the utilities need to buy SRECs that are generated in New Jersey. It's a closed state. Whereas in Pennsylvania, the utilities can buy SRECs from anywhere, and anywhere that generates SRECs. So there are some big projects that have come online in North Carolina, and the people down there send their SRECs to Pennsylvania, and that's made the market crash just based on supply and demand. So if the supply just keeps getting bigger and bigger, demand isn't going to keep up with that, and that's what causes the price to crash.
Yep. And our General Assembly, I understood, 2 years ago, had a bill. In fact, Republican Chris Ross was the guy who had sponsored this piece of legislation that would have fixed some of this, right?
Yes, definitely. There have been a couple pushes. Chris Ross has been a champion of it. The bill that you mentioned, I think there was more than 200 co-signers. Definitely would have passed the Assembly if it had been able to make it to the floor, but it wouldn't. The Republican leadership wouldn't let it out of committee, so it couldn't even get a fair vote on the floor of the House.
Now, could you make the argument that this is picking winners and losers, since there seems to be a lot of money flowing around because of the natural gas drilling, because of the Marcellus Shale, that you're kind of hampering solar by choosing not to help them?
Oh, without a doubt, without a doubt. Pennsylvania is a big coal and now natural gas state, and I think interest in those industries have been trying to put the brakes on the solar, because solar has become less and less expensive, and people are very interested in solar. It's got great widespread support from around the state.
Yeah, I've got solar panels in my house and absolutely thrilled with them. We generate about 40 to 45% of our total yearly energy from them. And in the summer months, we get no bill at all other than the taxes that we have to pay. So, it's like $15-18 a month during the summer to pay our electric bill. And we use air conditioning and do all of that stuff. So I'm thrilled to death with them. In fact, I'd love to do more. And if they fix this SREC credit problem, I would certainly do more so that maybe I get off the grid entirely.
That'd be great. Solar panels, the price of solar panels has come down drastically over the past 3 years. A system now is less than 50% as expensive as it was just a few years ago. So that's definitely been a big help. And if the SREC market could be stabilized, not even go up as high as New Jersey, but just be stabilized so people can know what to expect, then it would help the industry, and people could be investing in clean renewable energy.
Yeah, so think about this. I mean, just so we can wrap this up with this point. Think about this. We could create jobs because we need them, and good paying jobs that produce something that we need, while we can help bring down, even if you don't believe in climate change, we can at least lessen our dependence on fossil fuels. We could pay good, solid wages, invest in our future. There's so many wins in this, other than we're not picking drilling.
I agree with you 100%.
Lots of work to do, Mark. I appreciate you taking a little time for us. Thanks so much.
Well, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Great talking with you. Mark Bortman, he's the chief cook and bottle washer over at exactsolar.com. Exactsolar.com, the website, if you want to check it out. Lots of good stuff. Let's take a quick break. Right back with your thoughts. 1-888-520-RICK. 1-888-520-7425. This is The Rick Smith Show. For working people, come to talk.
And the register's low. The bartender don't have much to say. The regular crowd gets thinner each day. Some are maxed out all their credit cards. Some are working 2 jobs and living in cars. Minimum wage won't pay for a roof, won't pay for a drink. If you gotta have proof, just try it yourself, Mr. CEO. See how far 5.15 an hour will go. Take a part-time job at one of your stores. I bet you can't make it here anymore.
That's the way we deal with global warming, climate change, or any of those problems. Not through government intervention, not through government taxes.
Government can't wave a magic wand and make that happen. Let the private sector do this.
Republicans pan government action on climate and energy at their third presidential debate.
Special GNR coverage straight ahead from BradBlog.com. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
Governor Pataki, you've indicated you believe climate change is real and caused at least in part by human activity.
He's a witch. Burn him. This is your Green News Report. Witch! Okay, Desi Doyen, is it just my imagination, or are we actually seeing more conversation about climate change coming out in Republican presidential debates? And not to scoff at it, but to actually discuss what to do about it.
Well, it's a start. They don't really talk much about policy, but at least they're not as aggressively denying the science.
Former New York Governor George Pataki came out and actually excoriated the party, said that, yes, climate change is real. He's mad at Republicans for not understanding that. That's a start. Have I set the bar too low?
I believe you have, but hey, that's kind of where we are with today's Republican Party.
Plus, he was in the undercard kiddie table debate, so no one really saw that. So there's that.
Yes, at the third Republican presidential primary debate, both the main and the junior debate in Boulder, Colorado on Wednesday, debate host CNBC said they were going to focus on economic issues. And although one of the fastest growing sectors of the economy is clean energy, CNBC only briefly mentioned energy and climate change. In the so-called undercard debate, as you mentioned, former New York Governor George Pataki broke ranks and criticized the anti-science stance of most of his party.
One of the things that troubles me about the Republican Party is too often we question science that everyone accepts. I want Republicans to embrace innovation and technology. We could have far more clean energy. We can have next generation nuclear, thorium reactors that have no risk of meltdown. We can have solar panels on every home, R&D credits, let the private sector do this. We could export those technologies to places like China.
Now, Pataki was the only one to discuss really any kind of policy or expansion of clean energy. He echoes the policies of Democratic presidential candidates about accelerating clean energy investment and exporting that technology to the rest of the world, but he didn't have any real solutions for actually reducing emissions that cause climate change.
Yeah, there was some question about what will you do about climate change, and then they go on to talk about how we have to have as much energy as possible and never actually talk about reducing carbon emissions. New Jersey Governor Chris Christie in the main debate offered a similar take.
We've laid out a national energy plan that says that we should invest in all types of energy. We need to make sure that we do everything we can across all kinds of energy. Natural gas, oil, absolutely. But also where it's affordable, solar, wind in Iowa has become very affordable, and it makes sense. That's the way we deal with global warming, climate change, or any of those problems. Not through government intervention, not through government taxes.
Yes, well, wind in Iowa has become very affordable thanks to government tax credits. Not sure how more development of oil helps climate change.
That's right. It doesn't. Now, notice that Pataki and the other candidates advocate waiting for the private sector to get around to this. But the fact is that government research funding has been the main driver behind pretty much all tech innovation, from the internet to cell phones to fracking.
To oil and coal production for decades.
Exactly. And although he criticized the role of government policy, Governor Chris Christie took credit for New Jersey ranking third in the nation for solar installations. That's correct, but it wasn't a private sector miracle. That was thanks to government policies put in place by previous administrations.
Exactly. He actually pulled out of a regional greenhouse gas initiative. So it's fun that he's taking credit for what he didn't do.
And also note that for some reason, the other candidates kept completely silent and did not jump in to add their 2 cents for this.
Go figure.
No discussion of the UN climate talks either, which the next president will have to deal with. So we got basically the same Republican Party talking points: more oil and gas drilling, and no matter what their position on climate change, all of the Republican presidential candidates all agree we should make sure the government does nothing on climate. And although this CNBC debate was focused on economic issues, another thing CNBC did not cover was that this week, more major corporations have signed on to climate action. The White House announced on Monday that 81 more big corporations have signed on to support President Obama's Clean Power Plan.
So corporations, the private sector, is coming on board with what Barack Obama is doing. This debate on CNBC was supposedly about your money, your economy. Nobody talked about that. No questions were raised about that. The economy goes on. The fight against climate change goes on, as if it never occurred in the Republican Party and even on CNBC.
Yep.
For much more on our coverage today and the stories we couldn't get to, thanks to the Republicans and their debate and CNBC, check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
Sounds of silence.
Prevailing wage was actually discriminatory when it started. I don't think we need to go into the full history of that, but it was definitely meant to keep construction projects local. And we are now in pretty much of a global economy.
It's the end of the world as we know it. It's the end of the world.
Yes, we're in a global economy. I still remember when Wendy's was trying to do their all of their drive-through orders out of India. How many people remember? Anybody remember that? Where they were trying to, in India, they'd have a call center that would take all of the orders, and then they would just through computer, it would come on the screen at the grill, and you would put it out the window. You did away with the person on the other end of the speaker box. You were actually talking to someone in India. They actually tried that. It failed horribly because of the technology, but the thought was there. Anyway, welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. Let's go to the phone lines. Got Andy on line one. Andy, what's up, man? How you been?
Hi, Rick. How you doing?
I am good. What do you think about that? Giving your fast food order to somebody in India, because they're not going to demand 15 in a union.
Oh, my Lord. Well, you were just talking about that Novak dude at Yum Foods. I mean, the unfairness of that is just insane. The abuse and exploitation of his workforce so he can amass that just egregious, ugly, obscene amount of money in a pension.
$234 million.
Off the backs of these people who are working their friggin' fingers to the bones for him.
Beyond that huge number, the fact that you got 537,000 employees and under 9,000 of them have anything, to me, that's the more egregious number, because that's a decision of his to not make sure that his employees have something.
Right. Right. And then you said, too, with that article, by the Institute of Policy Studies, 41% of U.S. workers amount to the same retirements that 100 CEOs have. God, something is definitely wrong in Metville here.
Yep.
Big time.
And what do we do about it?
I just ran into a situation here where we have a city council running, and one of the supposedly not progressive, but definitely a Democrat candidate being pushed by the unions made a comment during a debate that they had against the candidates, saying $15, $20, that's not going to make a difference in people's lives. Yeah, that's not going to help you live in an area like this in Silicon Valley. I almost lost it. I'm there. Are you kidding me? I'm making $11.50 an hour in my part-time job. I'd love $15 or $20 an hour to help me so I don't have to take out of my retirement to supplement my even to pay my rent. I mean, the arrogance and the ignorance and the stupidity. And I just had a fireman come to my door pushing this candidate that said that. And I said to him, I can't believe it. How could you push somebody that doesn't even believe in paying workers a fair hourly wage? And this is a Democrat, supposedly, right?
Yeah, I mean, well, this is where the Democratic Party's got to find their backbone. And, maybe we need to have that time frame where we homogenize the party to stand up for working class values, much like the Republicans have done to stand up for corporate values.
Yeah, no question about it. And you've had Isaiah Poole on a number of times, and I remember the October 9th show in particular. It always comes up that you got to push the politicians. You got to push them to do it. That might have worked during Roosevelt's time, but now when you push the politicians, they attack you relentlessly. You're either the professional left, or they put their middle. If you're Rahm Emanuel, he puts his middle finger in the air, or he'll call you a 4-letter word. These people don't give a damn about the 99%, Rick.
But isn't this where we exercise our right to term limits? I mean, at some point, isn't it our fault that we've allowed them to do what you've said? And isn't it our fault for not showing up in their offices, in their home cities and pushing? And isn't that our fault on a certain level?
I don't want to say our, and I don't use we either. And I hate when you do that. I've made 90 calls to Iowa for Bernie Sanders. I with a couple other people, we did a farmer's market. We raised over $400 selling Bernie paraphernalia last Saturday for a couple hours. Some of us are out there actually trying.
Good for you. Good on you. This is how you do that.
Right. But unfortunately, there are so few of us that do it. I know a lot of my colleagues. I work a part-time job, making almost a pittance. And most of my other workers are doing 2 or 3 other part-time jobs. Where do people get the time? I mean, they've got the system so nailed down tight that people, the working class people that ought to be out there knocking on the doors and raising hell, are working their rear ends to the bone.
Yeah. No, I'm with you, and I know hundreds of people just like that. To where you're right. I just had someone today tell me that they don't know if they're going to be able to get out on Tuesday to vote, and they don't know that they're going to be able to put an absentee ballot in by today, by the end of business today, because they might have to work both jobs, which cover all of the time on Tuesday that they'd have to be able to vote.
Right. Because costs have gone. We're fighting here to try to get rent control. My rent's gone up 62% in 5 years.
Wow.
The last rate hike was almost over 11%. Next year, they've already told me they're going to up at 15%. And I've been at the city council. I've written all the members. I've written the county supervisors. Trying anything just to keep rent down. But rent, you can't even make enough at $15 an hour around here to cover your rent. It's just insane.
And again, this is where, you look at the Fight for 15 campaign, and you look at the fact that they're not just calling for $15 an hour, but they're saying we want $15 and a union. The reason that unions have been under such attack in this country by the right wing is because that was one of the places where that voice was brought together to push politicians. As unions have been broken, and as their collective power has been diminished, that push that Roosevelt called for isn't there. there isn't that collective voice of saying, I represent, 1 million employees and this is what these folks want. That really not there anymore.
Well, it's funny though. Even the union job I had was a low wage job too, not below $15 an hour. And when I brought it up to the shop steward said, "No way are you ever going to see $15 an hour here." I mean, really? Well, if you don't fight for it, Ms. Shop Steward, no, you're not going to see it. That's another thing. I mean, the stupidity and the just not giving up before you even started the battle. I mean, the working class people I think, have been so beaten down, so bludgeoned. They don't even have the fight in the dog,
I call it, it's just like Stockholm syndrome. We've been beaten for so long that folks have been beaten down. But at some point, it has to happen again, where that fire engages, and very quickly you see a movement. And that's why I love what Bernie Sanders is doing. You look at what Sanders is doing. He's building that grassroots group of folks like you who are out there having the flea markets or having the farmers markets, bringing in a couple $100 and doing that, talking to neighbors and coworkers and stuff. That's what we have to go back to. And that's where I go back to where we have to hold people accountable. That's the beginning of it.
Right. Well, I'm just saying there's folks out here trying.
I know.
Too bad there's just not enough of us.
But that's how you begin.
Yeah.
You got to start somewhere. And like I said, I give you nothing but the utmost credit for out there doing it, busting your behind and still having time and the interest to want to save the future of our country for not just you, but our kids in the future.
Right. Well, you make the time. And unfortunately, too, the politicians are really good liars, especially CEOs.
Of course
they're
they are.
marketeers.
They're marketers. They're folks who they come out of the ad industry.
Right, like a Carly Fiorino. She comes out of a marketing environment. She can say anything that is totally untrue, totally a lie, and make you believe it because she is trained to lie as a CEO, as a marketeer. You are trained to advertise, to market, to use Edward L. Bernays type Madison Avenue stuff, and she is coached. She is, as polished as you'll ever see. And that's that's how you become a CEO.
Yep. Well,
and
not
Carly
just that, all of them.
Fiorino,
all the politicians, they all have their things. And they've all got people who are advising them and training them on how not to tell the absolute truth and how to evade and duck questions. That's part of the gig. It's our job to see through that stuff.
Right. But they'll smile at you and they'll say it with conviction, and it's a complete lie. And I'm telling you, that goes for Obama too. I'm sorry, with free trade deals, with the health care. He was, for the single payer, and then the public option later after that. And then we end up, with the Heritage Foundation plan. Same thing with free trade. Oh, I'm not for free trade. I'm going to put on my walking shoes. I'll be putting on my walking shoes. You sure you will, you bum.
Tell us what you really think, Andy.
Yeah, he's been a bum. It's been a disaster.
There are a lot of things I'm not thrilled with this president.
Yeah.
And I'm sure there are going to be a lot of things with the next one, no matter who it is. I'm not going to be thrilled. But
well, with Hillary too, I'm sorry. Yeah. It's all marketing.
Yeah, I'm with you.
All marketing.
Good thoughts, Andy. I appreciate it, man.
All right, man. Have a great
Good
weekend.
Talking with you. Thanks so much. Call again, quick.
Good listening to your program.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
man. I appreciate it. Let's take a quick break. Right back. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
We gotta take the bastards
down. Good news about obesity. A new scientific organization is coming to grips with this bulging national problem. Called the Global Energy Balance Network, it comes at obesity from a unique perspective, namely that the key to controlling one's weight is not cutting back on calorie consumption, but committing to a regular program of exercise. Great, huh? You can literally have your cake and eat it too. Before you swallow GEBN's approach, however, note that nearly all scientists on the obesity beat say the opposite. Exercise is a minimal contributor to weight loss compared to putting fewer calories in the tank. So what's behind the contrarian new group? Coca-Cola. Yes, Global Energy Balance Network was created and is financed by the world's leading purveyor of sugary sodas. And Coke is also the leading purveyor of empty-calorie science, trying to convince us that its bottled bombs of obesity have no bad effects on human health. The corporate giant's latest scientific fraud is prompted by corporate panic. Sales of full-calorie sodas have plummeted by 25% in the past 2 decades as public health campaigns have ratcheted up to warn of cola's dangers. Consequently, obesity rates, especially for young children, are down, and Coca-Cola now lists obesity concerns by the public as the #1 threat to its business. The choice between your health and the health of their corporate profits is an easy decision for Coke's top executives. So they're trying this trick play to shift the obesity blame from their calories to your lack of exercise. This is Jim Hightower saying, next they'll be promoting the Coca-Cola workout plan. Do several repetitions of 12-ounce elbow bends each day with cans of Coca-Cola, and keep your heart strong by briskly striding to the fridge to grab each can. Remember, every repetition adds up.
Hightower's commentaries are brought to you by the Hightower Lowdown, the monthly newsletter with Hightower's populist take on what the powers that be are up to. Find out more at hightowerlowdown.org.
Great article over at The Atlantic today that I came across by Teresa Ghilarducci. And it kind of lays out what we were talking about, this lack of strength within the labor movement because of, a generation of attacks, a generation of messaging that unions are bad. And, she points out, and I think rightly so, that you've even got groups like the International Monetary Fund who are now saying that we need to have stronger labor unions. The democracies across this country and across the globe have to have stronger labor unions in order to grow their economies and boost productivity and do all those things. And she points out that the U.S. has one of the lowest unionization rates in the world, well behind Germany, well behind Canada, down there at the bottom with Mexico. And you go, how's that possible? How is it possible that in a wealthy nation like we have, more than 1 in 5 jobs pay less than 2/3 the median wage? We have abject poverty wage jobs. How's that possible? How is it possible that we're working almost 1,800 hours a year on average, while the rest of the industrialized world is somewhere below 1,600? How is that possible? How is it possible in this country that you have adult workers, almost 12% of us working more than 50 hours a week, when in places where around the world, like Dutch workers, for instance, you've got like 1% of them, less than 1%, who work more than 50 hours a week. And you start looking at this stuff and you go, there's a problem. Now, the IMF, when their conclusion is that countries that have higher unionization rates enjoy lower rates of inequality, enjoy lower poverty rates. The IMF, we're not talking some hippie liberal, fancy pants, latte drinking, Volvo driving, none of that. I'm talking the IMF. And they point out that, when you have strong unions and a strong labor movement, wages go up, the middle class grows, even the lowest paid workers get a boost upward. Unionized workers tend to have much higher rates of employer-based health care, much, much higher rates of actually having a pension. I mean, you go back to the Yum brand. The reason that those 537,000 workers, of which only less than 9,000 have pensions, the reason that they don't have pensions, they don't have any bargaining power to say we demand it, which is why this Fight for 15 campaign is so important. The reality is when you have a strong labor movement, you're talking about pushing for education for all kids. You're talking about tax codes that are fairer. You're talking about increases in Social Security and retirement benefits. All of those things that we say as a society we want, they fight for. And while the right wing has done a masterful job of attacking, what's happened? All of those things have gone down. Social Security basically frozen. Retirement, something of the past. A living wage, good luck on that one. Which is why I'm a huge advocate for workers being able to collectively bargain and fight for better wages, hours, conditions. That's simple. But what's happened to us, we've been divided on the lines of, they're going to take our guns, or God, guns, gays, or any of that. When the reality is they're robbing us blind. It's that simple. Let's take a quick break. Right back. When we come back, we'll talk about the big debt deal that's been reached, what it means, and, fortunately, not another crisis. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
All they want to do is and take your money. All they want to do is and take your money.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to thericksmithshow.com. If you've missed any portion of the program, you can download the podcast at thericksmithshow.com.
You're listening to WIN, Workers Independent News, a production of Diversified Media Enterprises. I'm Doug Cunningham. An historic decision by the NLRB regional director in Tucson, Arizona on the employment status of Tucson taxi drivers means thousands of taxi drivers around the country could be newly eligible for union representation. The Office of Professional Employees International Union assisted the Tucson Hacks Association in winning this ruling. Mel Schwartzwald is OPEIU's general counsel.
We believe it means a great deal not only to these drivers, but to many cab drivers across the country. What the regional director has done is said that taxi cab drivers are really employees rather than independent contractors.
While this could be appealed by the employer, Schwartzwald says the Tucson cab drivers can still move forward.
The next step here would be to have an election to see if they want to be represented by the Tucson Hacks Association. And that should shortly be scheduled by the regional director. It is possible that that election could be delayed with an appeal process, but that depends in part on what the employer does. But there should be a vote fairly soon.
The NLRB ruling is the first of its kind for taxi drivers. The Labor Board this year in the FedEx Home Delivery Incorporated decision and the Browning Ferris Industries case has been redefining what constitutes employees versus independent contractors. Workers continue to be on the march at the Port of Long Beach. Long Beach City Councilwoman Lena Gonzalez joined striking port truck drivers on the picket line at Long Beach Container Terminal. Amazon warehouse workers picketed and rallied in Long Beach on Thursday as well. Misclassification of employees as contractors and wage theft are among the main issues in strikes that are continuing at the ports of Long Beach and Los Angeles. UAW GM workers are taking a look at the details of the tentative new labor contract as they prepare to vote on whether or not to ratify it. All the workers will get $8,000 bonuses upon ratification. Traditional higher wage UAW members will get 3% wage raises in the first and third years, 4% lump sums in the second and fourth. Lower wage in progression members will get raises on a path to traditional wages. Workers with 3 or more years at GM will get to the full traditional wage of approximately $29 an hour by the end of this 4-year contract. The UAW says it won $1.9 billion in new investments in U.S. plants on top of the $6.4 billion announced earlier this year. UAW President Dennis Williams says it's up to the workers now to approve or disapprove this deal.
As with every negotiation process, our members makes the final decision, and we look forward to the discussion ahead.
Workers Independent News is brought to you with support from union-owned, union-represented Bank of Labor. Bank of Labor has provided trust and fiduciary services to labor organizations for nearly a century. Online at bankoflabor.com.
You've been listening to WIN, Workers Independent News. For more information, visit laborradio.org.
Don't really care about the economy. Don't care much about democracy. I'm a member of the GOP, trying to form a plutocracy. But if I can just bamboozle you and just share my narrow point of view, What a wonderful world this would be.
Yes, what a wonderful world it would be if nobody just paid attention and they got the railroad through all of their bad ideas. And you go back to when the debate the other night, that just kind of blew my mind. Wednesday's debate was kind of all of the bad policies, all of the bad stuff that got us into the Great Depression. And interestingly enough, the very next day, Black Tuesday, one of those history moments that just kind of wasn't lost on me, and I don't think should be lost on us either. But here's the good news, I guess. Maybe no hostage crisis. I was kind of looking forward to another 24 ticking bomb kind of thing. Maybe not so much. Early this morning, the Senate passed a 2-year budget deal that will avoid the shutdown. We'll actually pay our bills, not going to default on our debt. And the House passed it, as you know, earlier, and the president's about to sign it. I thought it'd be an interesting opportunity to talk about, other than the Freedom Foyer, which is in this, which I have no idea why John Boehner insisted to rename part of the Capitol there, the Freedom Foyer. But it just is what it is. But outside of that, what else is in this? Which is why I've asked Mateus Verdongo. He is a professor of economics there at Bucknell University. Mateus, thanks for taking time for us.
Oh, thank you for having me.
So other than the Freedom Foyer, what do we need to know about this?
So the plan is overall good. I mean, in the sense that given the alternative, we avoided, as you said, a shutdown, which could have, really slow down the economy even more. You have to remember that this week we got numbers for the third quarter of GDP, and we have a significant slowdown to 1.5%, if memory doesn't, fail me, from 3.9 in the second quarter. So the growth is not particularly strong, and if we had a shutdown, that would certainly hurt us, even possibly throw us into recession. And we also avoided, and now we avoided this until the end of the Obama administration. So this was the last sort of hijacking of the administration and its policies by the Tea Party. But we avoided a default with the hike of the debt ceiling.
Right.
And I should note that the U.S. is one of only 7 countries that has a debt ceiling on debt in its own currency, and only one other developed country has something like that. That's Denmark, and Denmark has a ceiling that it's so far, away that there is no chance that they will ever default. And so the U.S. is very peculiar in that way. And I should say, normally it wasn't. Even with previous Democratic presidents, this was something that was a done deal.
Yeah.
This was never used to threaten a default to obtain political gains.
We have former Congressman Bob Ney on the program quite often, in his capacity to talk radio news service, and he says, when he was in Congress, he called it a yawn vote. You went in, you did it because you had to, because you already spent the money. If you wanted to fight that fight, you should have done it before you spent the money. This is just a matter of paying for it.
There is also a sort of a very simple economic reason. Forget that the question of you should pay your bills and this, that, and the other, is that it makes no sense not to pay, not increase the debt ceiling, because the debt in your own currency, and that's valid for all countries, the debt in your own currency. So even Argentina, that defaulted 5 times in its history, and I'm from Argentina originally. So Argentina defaults in its external debt, the debt that it's denominated in dollars, but like Greece, that doesn't print euros and they have a debt in euros, and so they have a problem. But on the debt on its own currencies, countries normally don't default, and it doesn't mean that you can print debt willy-nilly and have all the debt that you want. But the important issue in this case is, and I think we discussed this before, but it's always worth remembering, it's not so much that you have debt, but it's the use that that you put the debt to. So if you borrow money to build infrastructure, to educate the labor force, to have gain productivity and hence higher wages and bigger markets and so on and so forth, there is no problem with having that, because all of those things imply what? An economy that's growing robustly, and you have revenue and you can pay the debt. So it's not the debt per se that it's a problem. It's what we do with the debt.
Yeah. So if you decide you're going to spend a couple of $1 trillion making big rocks small in the Middle East, that probably not the best use of
Exactly.
of
So
borrowed
those
money.
are the issues that are really relevant. So the other side of this deal is that they increased a little. A lot of Republicans. So a few voted against, I should say. Ted Cruz, you were referring to the debate in your intro, and Ted Cruz that did not reply in the debate whether he would be for raising the debt ceiling or not. He didn't vote for this, and he spoke against this, as did Rand Paul. And they all see the agreement as being negative. So the right of the Republican Party, so the really fringe candidates on the right of the Republican Party, have been really against this because they think this deal will increase spending. But the increase in spending is tiny. It's $80 billion. Remember, total federal government spending is probably around I want to say $5 trillion or something like that. So at least about $4 trillion probably. 5 if we add states and
right.
Local government. So it's tiny. It's not significant. And they also did some stuff that one should be concerned, but it's typical of this kind of agreement. So that they have reduce, try to reduce that part is not necessarily bad. Reduce what they pay to physicians and Medicare and whatnot, so to economize some money on that. But the other is they want to pay make it more difficult for people to get disability, and that would eventually hurt some people. That there is a study that I saw the other day that suggests that the increasing costs with disability have been associated to the fact that we raised the age of retirement to 66. So there is a significant number of people that are 65 years old that used to receive simply, retirement, but now they are in disability, and that's mostly what explains that, and that may make it difficult for people like that to receive disability. So it's something that increases government spending, not very much. That may try to cut stuff on the corners, but also not very much. But it's also important to remember this context. This comes in a context in which over the last 3 years. So right after the packages, the fiscal packages of expansion, with the crisis, so that we actually did the right thing, time to spend more and get out of the recession. Not spending enough, and not necessarily in all the things that we would want, and not increasing minimum wages, not doing a lot of the stuff that was necessary to get out of the crisis in a robust way. But we did that. But after 2011, 2012. The government has been essentially doing contractionary fiscal policy because of all of these, hijackings of fiscal policy in Congress, with the threatening of shutdown and whatnot.
Yeah, all the austerity and all the sequester and all that.
Yes, exactly. And so what this did is it maintains status quo, basically. So we don't get what we need, which is a healthy sort of spending bill on the kinds of things that would lead to growth.
Now, in looking at this, because some of my friends on the left, they seem to be okay with it because they say, well, the Republicans didn't get the ram through the Keystone XL pipeline. They didn't defund Planned Parenthood. The Obamacare wasn't defunded or repealed or any of that. And Social Security and Medicare look like they're going to be okay. And I'm looking at someone like Paul Ryan, who's now going to be the head guy, going, a lot of that stuff that my friends on the left are happy didn't get pushed through in this are still on the target block. It's still something that I think Ryan will want to go after. I'm curious your thoughts.
Oh, sure. I think that there you just hit exactly the crux, the central issue of this. Why it didn't happen? Why we didn't have the sort of at least the threat of a shutdown that seemed, when we spoke about this in a previous show. I suggested, well, there is a very high likelihood that this might happen. And we're here and, it was gone. Nothing almost happened. And the reason is that they didn't have a candidate. The Tea Party didn't have somebody that they can push for the leadership in the House. And the compromise candidate, Ryan, threatened them. So he used Tea Party politics and told them the only way I'll come is if you do exactly what I say here at the beginning and give me a clean slate. But as you suggest, this comes, obviously with a price tag for them. They didn't shut down the government. They didn't defund or try to defund
Planned Parenthood.
Yeah. But on the other hand, they'll have to accept his agenda, and his agenda is very far right. He wants to do tax reform. He wants to rewrite federal programs, entitlement programs. So there has been talk today. The Wall Street Journal says that there is some talk of changing the rules for obtaining supplemental, the program SNAP, the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, the old food stamps. So it's not like those things will vanish, and all of those will come back into the agenda, probably with a more unified, or that's at least what they're planning, a more unified Republican Party behind these more radical proposals.
Which is scary because the Tea Party and the quote unquote, and I hate using the frame, but the quote unquote Freedom Caucus, or as I call them, the Scorched Earth Caucus, they don't have enough power to run the asylum, but they do have enough power to disrupt things so nothing gets done. So it's completely dysfunctional. And you're right. I think Ryan is bright enough. I think he's politically astute enough to use that to his advantage. And this is what came out of this. And they made it a 2-year deal so that, it's not going to be another election year issue that they're going to have to face next year.
Well, that's favorable for them too. So the Republican Party guaranteed with this, the establishment of the party, that they won't have, the term I like for them, it's, Maureen Dowd called them the Neanderthals. And so
that's good.
The Neanderthals, will not be front page during the campaign season next year. So that they will not be threatening with a shutdown of the government in the middle of the election season. And I think that's part also of what they did with this. So, but they will come back, and they're hoping, that they'll get a presidential, candidate winning the election, and with that they'll have the power, and Congress and Senate, and with that they'll have the power to overhaul a lot of this stuff that your friends and my friends on the left are afraid that they may sort of, attack.
And I would say not just on the left, I would say the center and partially to the right, because look, what they want to do is undo the entire New Deal and basically undo the 20th century, everything that built the largest, most prosperous working class in the history of civilization. And I don't know if you watched the debates on Wednesday night, but it was ironic to me that Thursday this week was the anniversary of Black Tuesday back in 1929, and you have all of these candidates talking about the same policies and initiatives that got us into that mess in the first place.
Sure. No, they want to roll. I think you're right when you say they want to roll the whole 20th century. It even goes further than the New Deal. They want to roll the progressive reforms. They want to, a lot of them want to eliminate the Federal Reserve Board. The whole idea of audit the Federal Reserve. And don't get me wrong, one may be critical of certain things that the Fed did during the rescue of banks, in particular, TARP, which actually precedes Obama and whatnot. But overall, and there are also issues of the Justice Department not prosecuting, the banksters,
anyone,
so to speak. But without the Fed acting as a lender of last resort, they could have rescued the financial system and not let all of the banks go, broke, and save the savings and the pensions of people and so on and so forth without giving money to bankers. But
isn't that the world they want?
We would have had something like the Great Depression. So that's the other thing. So we had a shock in September 2008. Things were so bad that it wasn't crazy to speculate about the possibility of something like the Great Depression. Many people at that time did talk as if this was a possibility. And what saved us, that's the important thing to remember, what saved us from another Great Depression were the institutions that were created in the progressive era and during the New Deal and during the 1960s. So those institutions that allowed for managing the financial sector, for paying to unemployed people, to give Social Security to the elderly, and healthcare and so on and so forth. All those institutions are the ones that prevent not just the fiscal package and the actions of the Fed immediately, so to speak. It's the fact that these institutions were in place.
Yep.
You see, and that saved us from. So these people owe the fact that we didn't have a complete collapse of the system, and we didn't go to 25% unemployment, which, by the way, it's happening in Europe. It happened, 10, 15 years ago when Argentina defaulted. So it's not something that stopped happening around the world. So it didn't happen here because of those institutions.
And that's a message that has to be repeatedly told, because you listen to those people during the debate and they want to undo all that. They want to take us back to the desperation era of the Lochner era, where, if you're desperate enough to work in crummy conditions for no money, then that's your liberty. You have the liberty of contract. No maximum hour laws, no minimum wage, no laws, no child labor laws, no OSHA, none of that stuff. That's the world that stage of political candidates wants.
Yes, the level of the debate, I should say, it's always surprising that they, some of the tax proposals are, plainly nuts. And
that's a nice way of putting it.
And Kasich said so. That's the interesting thing. One of the things that was most discussed about the debate was that Kasich basically told everybody these plans are crazy. They're talking about tithing and stuff like that. Makes absolutely no sense. And what everybody remembers is that Donald Trump told him, that he was mean, but because he doesn't have the votes, and that's why he's on the sidelines.
Yeah.
And mind you, he was at Lehman Brothers. There's certainly Trump is savvy on certain level in his reply, but the point is that Kasich was actually right, and Trump wrong on this one. But that's not what transpired in the discussions afterwards.
Yeah, but all the tax plans seem to be the same. We're going to continue to cut taxes for the wealthy because they know what to do with it. And I agree, they do. They know what to do with money when you give it to them. Make more money for themselves.
Yeah.
It doesn't take a genius to figure that out.
No, and but part of the story on this is also that there is evidence of this, and the evidence of this is that it's not particularly helpful. So tax cuts for the wealthy, for certain types of investment, all of those things that supposedly the supply siders suggested back in the 70s would lead to significant growth. It's simply not there. There is no evidence that this works. So at this point, one would imagine that after so many years of failed policies, that they would learn the lesson. But remember that this is this was a debate on economics, but this is the dysfunctionality of the Republican Party is something to be concerned. This is a party that nobody accepts relatively common sense things like evolution or global warming or. So it shouldn't be surprising that in economics too, common sense has gone out the window.
Yeah, good point. Last question I've got. Good deal. This is in your overall opinion. Good deal, bad deal. Would you sign it if you were Obama?
He has to sign it. This is the best worst deal we can get. So there is no other deal on the table. And so the problem with this is that it condemns us to the sort of slow recovery that we have. The recovery is better than any other thing that could have happened if we actually follow the policies that these people want. But it doesn't give him enough space to implement the simple stuff. A few years back, he was not far from here, I think in Ohio, in front of a bridge that was crumbling, and said, I just want to spend money to fix infrastructure. That used to be a nonpartisan thing.
Yep.
And we cannot do, that's what I'm saying. I'm not saying let's go and expand, and have Medicare for all, which we should do. But that's not the things that he's even trying to put on the table. He did the health reform that they wanted, the Republican plan, and they're even against that. So I'm saying stuff that used to be, a no-brainer. Let's fix the roads. And we can do those kinds of things. So it's a sad moment that we cannot do just basic stuff. And the best we can do is this deal that maintains a status quo that it's not particularly good.
Good point. We're never going to go back to the moon because we can't get to the tarmac is basically how I'm taking it. Mateus, I appreciate you taking a little time for us. Thanks so much for your insight.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Great talking to you. I look forward to talking to you again next week. Mateus Vernango, professor of economics at Bucknell University, does a fantastic blog, nakedkeynesianism.blogspot.com. The site, you can just get there from the ricksmithshow.com. Click on Mateus's name, take you right there. Quick break, right back. Stick around. Listen to The Rick Smith Show.
Think of all the roads, think of all their crossings. Taking steps is easy, standing still is hard. Remember all their faces, remember all their voices. Everything is different the second time around.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1986. That was the day that Edward Meese gave a speech to the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. Meese was serving as Attorney General under President Ronald Reagan. During his speech, Meese encouraged bosses to spy on their employees in order to determine if they were using drugs. He said management also has to take responsibility for surveillance of problem areas such as locker rooms, parking lots, shipping and mail room areas, and even the nearby taverns if necessary as part of controlling this problem. He also advocated for drug testing of employees. Ronald Reagan had declared what he termed the war on drugs in 1982. Meese was outlining a plan to make the workplace a battlefront of that war. During his speech, he said, "The workplace is the strategic pass-through which almost all Americans move. Consequently, the workplace can be a choke point on this use or misuse of illegal drugs." After the speech, a spokesman for Meese assured the press that the Attorney General was not advocating for bosses to infringe on the civil liberties of their employees. Many workers and unions have disagreed with that assessment. Since 1987, drug testing by employers has risen more than 250%. In 1987, the National Labor Relations Board ruled that drug testing was a mandatory subject of bargaining. By all accounts, Reagan's war on drugs had little success in stopping drug use. In 2005, 82% of polled police and sheriffs called the war a failure. However, the war on drugs has handed a resounding victory to corporate special interests like drug testing companies and privatized prisons. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com.
Tales of American Political History with Clinton Porter Hackney.
We've been discussing President Grover Cleveland's clandestine cancer surgery done to maintain his strong public image for congressional repeal of the Sherman Act. Doctors Joseph Bryant and W.W. Keene conducted the operation on a yacht, and the removal was done through the open mouth instead of the jaw to avoid any signs of surgery. When all was said and done, one newspaper story appeared about a surgery, but was suppressed by the political machinery of the time. Grover Cleveland died 15 years later, and eventually Dr. Keene published an article detailing the truth. In 1975, the long-stored tumor sample was determined to be malignant. The most important result of the cover-up may have been that Cleveland convened Congress on August 7th, the House repealed the Sherman Act on August 28th, and the Senate did the same on October 1st. Cleveland had achieved his goal, and the economy improved. This is Clinton Porter Hackney at cphackney.com.
Chances are, when you took a shower this morning, an AFSCME member made sure that water was clean. When you drove to work, an AFSCME member maintained the road. When you rode an elevator, an AFSCME member inspected it. I'm David Philman, Executive Director of AFSCME Council 13, the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees. AFSCME members enforce regulations, keep prisoners behind bars, take care of patients, protect the environment, and more. The work isn't glamorous, the salaries aren't high, but AFSCME members serve the public in every aspect of our daily lives. Chances are, you'll never see that AFSCME member working in a sewage plant, diving underwater to repair a bridge, or answering a 911 call. But aren't you glad they do? For more information, visit AFSCME13.org. We are AFSCME.
The man who sends the investor class diving for their tax shelters. Rick Smith.
Yes, diving for the tax shelters. In fact, just buying yourself political candidates who are going to make sure that you don't have to worry about paying taxes. Yesterday, Ted Cruz released his grand plan. In in the Donald Trump, Ben Carson, all of them have plans that follow the same train of thought. We're going to cut taxes on the very wealthy. That money will then trickle down to everybody else because they're job creators, and that will generate revenue. And it's a nice on paper kind of theory. Problem is, doesn't work. Problem is not going to happen. So what you've got is Ted Cruz who's saying that we're going to have a 10% flat tax. That's what it's going to be. Anyone who make a family of four making 36 grand a year or less will not pay anything until they reach that threshold. Then they'll pay 10%. And then everybody else 10%. So the top, just do the quick math. Right now, the very wealthy in the country have a tax rate of 39.6% with a bunch of loopholes. And the capital gains rate right now is 23% with a bunch of loopholes. They're going to get a cut down to 10%. Now, they claim they're going to get rid of the loopholes. Here's the reality. And this is the part that gets me. The reality is all those loopholes will come back. We saw that happen in 1986, and we will see it again, just at a lower rate. Understand, right now you have a corporate income tax of 35%. Nobody pays that. What Cruz is saying, flat right across the board, bottom line tax, 16%. Here's the reality. Right now, with all the loopholes, and this is just one of those, you got to be kidding me, with all of the loopholes in place, right now, corporate America is paying 19%. Under the Cruz flat tax, 16%. So you're still talking a massive, massive handout to the business community. And the hope is, and this is, you go, well, the hope is that they take that money and they invest and they create jobs. And it's a nice thought. It's just not going to happen. Sorry. We've seen this movie, and guess what? It ends poorly. It's like those horror movies where you go, don't split up and don't go in the basement. Don't do it. And you split up and go in the basement, and someone gets hacked up and mauled and butchered. And you go, dummy, don't do it, because you've seen the movie. Same thing here. We've seen the movie. We've seen what these tax cuts do. We've seen what these schemes do. We've seen it. Why do we keep going, well, okay, let's try it again? One of those things you go, how do we get talked into this again? How does that happen? And you look at the reality, the wealthy in this country, they're going to, one way or another, they're going to get it all. Now, Cruz claims that his plan is going to create 4.9 million new jobs. And I don't know where this job fairy is, but that ain't going to happen. What's going to happen is our deficits are going to get bigger, our debt gets bigger, because as it was scored, Cruz's revenue plan actually generates about $3.6 trillion less over the next decade than just leaving things alone. Not going to happen to the way he says. What's going to happen is we're going to get screwed even more. But that's the point, isn't it? That is the point. Let's find out. Let's take a break and let's find out what's going on in the world with our weekly Wingnut in Review with Terrence Heath from the Campaign for America's Future. I'll get it out. I'm telling you. Today I will do it. Quick break. Right back.
I guess that's why they call me. They call me the working man.
Making the blue blood see red. The Rick Smith Show.
The 19th century saw regular work weeks of 70 hours or more. Many attempts were made to get legislatures across the country to pass maximum hour laws limiting the number of hours an employee could be compelled to labor. The first union victory in capping work hours was won by the building trades in 1840. They won a 60-hour week. In 1874, the state of Massachusetts became the first to pass a law mandating a maximum hours for women. Other states followed as union activists around the country fought to pass laws to protect workers. Their work stalled in 1905 when the U.S. Supreme Court ruled the New York Bake Shop Act unconstitutional, citing a sacred bond between master and employee and the liberty of contract. With this decision, the Lochner era, named after bakery owner Joseph Lochner, who had been cited, tried, and convicted of working employees beyond the 60-hour limit, began. This single decision opened the floodgates, allowing a tax on child labor laws, minimum wage laws, as well as maximum hour laws by corporate and anti-union interests. Only after President Franklin Delano Roosevelt threatened to enlarge the United States Supreme Court from 9 to 13 did the court do an about-face with regard to liberty of contract and what has been called a switch in time to save 9, ruling in West Coast Hotel versus Parish that Elsie Parish was indeed entitled to the state of Washington's minimum wage, regardless of what conditions she agreed to, marking the end of the Lochner era. FDR's New Deal policies helped workers reclaim lost ground in their fight for the American dream. The proposal and passage of the Fair Labor Standards Act, federally restricting weekly hours, mandating overtime pay, setting a minimum wage, and restricting the exploitative use of child labor was an essential step forward for workers, families, and communities. This Rick Smith Show Labor History Moment was made possible by a grant from the Labor Education Center at IUP. For more information, visit www.thericksmithshow.com.
Monday morning feels so bad. Everybody seems to connect me. Coming Tuesday, I feel better. Even my old man looks good. This Wednesday it's goes so slow. Thursday, I don't know. I got Friday on my mind.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show, and it is Friday. Thank goodness it is Friday after what I would call probably a crazy week. Just the debate on Wednesday, Paul Ryan, all of that Wednesday night stuff, the era of taking us back. Just very, very strange week, which is why I thought it'd be a good opportunity to talk to our good friends at the Campaign for America's Future, ourfuture.org, the website about the week that was, and Terrence Heath's The Wingnut Week in Review. Terrence, thanks for taking time for us.
Thanks for having me.
So the Wingnuts were really out on full display this week. Wednesday night, front and center, the cavalcade of crazy, the clown bus, whatever you want to call it. It was quite the debacle.
Yes, it takes a lot for John Kasich to be the voice of reason on a stage like that. So that tells you something about where we were.
And probably one of the only things that you go, I absolutely agree with, was Donald Trump going, and thank you, Donald Trump, by the way, for negotiating it down to 2 hours so we didn't have to listen to another minute of it.
Yeah, it's one of those things that I can't describe it. It's almost surreal watching these debates, and they talked for 2.5 hours. And no one said anything remotely substantive.
And that's entertaining, because one of my take on it the next day was it appeared to me to be an audition for who's going to follow Herman Cain into taking on a talk radio program. It was kind of an audition to who's going to be the next Herman Cain. Well,
I was shocked to find out that CNBC was a part of the liberal media. This is the network that spawned the Tea Party with Pete Santelli. I mean, I had no idea that they were a part of the so-called liberal media.
And it's exactly what I said. How is it that the Wall Street talking heads are the ones who you're claiming is the liberal media? If we'd gone that far to the right, we're in much bigger trouble than even I thought.
I was going to say, if they're on our side, then we need to reevaluate.
But, out of the debate, there's got to be some whittling down. At some point, some of the dead weight's got to go. And in your Wingnut Week in Review, you're looking at the walking Jeb.
Oh yeah, it's one of those things that you know how one of the characteristics of a zombie is that everyone knows it's dead but the zombie. Oh, that's kind of the situation with Jeb Bush's campaign. Pretty much everyone knows it's dead except Jeb.
But the thing that keeps Jeb alive is he's got $100 million in his PAC.
for all the good it's doing him. I mean, he's got $100 million, so perhaps the idea is that he'll unleash some of it late in the primary, but he's doing himself in with his own mouth.
Yeah, what I find interesting, though, Terrence, here's a guy who is sitting on $100 million, and his first reaction to a failing campaign is to cut the wages of his staff.
Right. Well, he did get rid of the private jet. So he is flying commercial now. But, to cut the wages of his staff. And
I can guarantee you he is not sitting in the middle seat and coach like Bernie Sanders.
No. I can guarantee you that if he's flying commercial, I would bet he's flying first class.
Of course he is. He doesn't want to be with the rabble. So does he go away? I mean, with $100 million, he's got some staying power. At some point, do his donors go, Jeb, there's the door. Don't let it hit you where the good Lord split you.
They're already looking at that. They're already looking at Marco Rubio, who in a perfect student surpasses teacher moment, pretty much stomped Jeb's attempt to take him down
with really a poorly crafted we hate the French kind of
right, which even the French ambassador and some other people responded to, which for a Republican to get mocked by the French has got to be about as bad as it gets. When the French are laughing at you, then you've pretty much hit the bottom of the barrel. But it's more than that. It's that Jeb's heart really doesn't seem to be in it anymore. I mean, when you tell a group of people who have come to see you at a campaign event in South Carolina, when you basically tell them, I got better things to do, I don't have to do this.
Wow.
I mean, if you want to go ahead and vote for Trump, go ahead and vote for Trump. I don't need this.
Not going to win you many. Not in the in the Dale Carnegie School of How to Win Friends, huh?
No. I mean, it's kind of amazing to watch this happening, because I've been in DC for a while, and I've been around politicians for a while, and politicians are politicians. They know how to work a room. They know how to work a crowd, and they can make you feel like you're the only person in the room when they're talking to you.
Yep.
And that's their job, is to make you like them.
And Jeb's not that guy.
He is not that guy.
Although Ted Cruz said he's not the kind of guy you want to go have a beer with, but he will get you home. He can drive you home. He knows how to drive. He's got his license. I mean,
right.
Come on, this is funny stuff. The sad reality is it would be hysterical if these weren't the people who were vying to hold the most powerful job in the world.
Right, to be leader of the free world, and compare that with the Democratic debate, which was one of those moments when people look and realize, oh, this is what it's like at the grown-ups table.
Well, let me ask you this: how much? Because I've got some Republican friends who say, "Wow, it's the media's fault." And of course, when the candidates on Wednesday night pointed at the Wall Street media there and blamed them, people go, "Oh yeah, it's their fault." In your view, I mean, you've been around this for a while. In your view, is this the media's fault?
Let me tell you something. I use this analogy a lot, as a comparison a lot. I'm a parent. I have two kids, 7 and 12, and I know when I'm getting a line of bull, when I ask them a question, and so they're answering the question, they get mad at me for asking it, which is what you saw on that stage. This wasn't the media's fault. These are people whose entire campaigns at this point are woven with a fabric of lies. I mean, how many lies were told on that stage, where someone asks a candidate, why did you say this about some person, and the candidate, Donald Trump, says, I didn't say that, but on your website it says you did. Or Ben Carson, what do you have to say about your relationship with this shady supplement company? Oh, I didn't have a relationship with them. but you made an infomercial for them and you gave paid speeches at their event. So
yeah, but that's different. That doesn't mean I'm in with them. That just means they were paying me.
Exactly. And so you had no relationship with them except a business relationship where you did commercials for them and spoke at their events.
Yeah, that was just a paid shill. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, just because there's a 20 on the dresser does not mean there's no relationship.
Oh,
That's all I'm
now you're going there. Okay. All right.
That's all I'm going to say.
And I think that elicits an image of which, you could probably make to all of the candidates there. But, one of the things that caught me, one of the other big lies, Carly Fiorina came out and said, 92% of all the jobs lost were by women. And I'm going, really?
Where did that come from?
What orifice was that pulled out of?
I seriously think that sometimes they literally, we know Carly Fiorina makes things up. I mean, whole videos that only she has seen, no one else in the world, in the universe, has seen them but her.
I don't doubt that she saw them, Terrence. I do not doubt that she saw something in her head. It's just maybe it wasn't on tape. Maybe it was something, that she was just imagining. But I don't doubt she believes she saw something.
Yeah, there's a word for things that you see that no one else can see. Hallucination, maybe. I don't know. But the whole debate seemed to be who could dodge legitimate questions, and of course that's something that we've gotten used to with the GOP, with conservatives, with the Tea Party. Is the moment someone starts to ask them legitimate questions. I mean, we saw it back when the lady who I think can be somewhat blamed for bringing us all of these people and bringing us to a place where all of these people could seriously be standing on the stage, wanting to be and thinking they have a shot at being leader of the free world.
Okay, Sarah.
The woman who made "What newspapers do you read?" a gotcha question.
Yep, our girl K. Sarah Palin.
It's one of those things that I'm not surprised that we got here because I know how we got here, but I think at some point it's going to come to a crashing halt for the GOP, and I don't know what the country is going to suffer because of it. Because at some point, people will want things to work, and you right now have people running for president. You have people in Congress who are invested in the government not working, and so I cannot help but wonder what's going to happen. Now I don't see anyone on that stage, barring some sort of miracle or disaster, depending on your point of view. I don't see anyone who was on that stage sitting in the Oval Office.
And I hope not. I hope not. Because I got a couple of emails today. Our candidate's the guy, and I'm going, no, please. That scares me. Because a whole bunch of reasons. I mean, inequality growing larger, another war somewhere, all bad ideas. And I don't know if you picked up on it, but as I was listening to all of those people talk, I knew that Thursday was the anniversary of the 1929 crash of Wall Street,
right.
Black Tuesday it was called.
Right.
All of them seem, except for maybe Kasich a little bit, but all of them seem to be advocating for the same bad ideas that got us into that mess.
Right, exactly. And there, you were looking at a lot of people on that stage. Granted, there are some people who are sitting governors on that stage, Kasich, Christie, and some people who are senators. But the front runners are people who have never been involved in government by any stretch of the imagination.
So what does that say about the Republican voter?
Right, exactly. And who, honest to goodness, know next to nothing about. I'm sure I could probably spend an hour on Wikipedia and know as much about foreign policy as Ben Carson, Donald Trump, or Carly Fiorina.
Good point. No, I mean, it's true. But isn't that the kind of anti-intellectualism that you get from a lot of right-wing voters?
Right, and I think that it works with right-wing voters, but I don't think it's going to work in the general election.
Oh, you hope not.
Where people are, I think the majority of people are going to be looking for someone with some knowledge, with some smarts, with
no, I'm with you because I've always said, you're not going to get my vote if I think I'm smarter than you. I don't want to have a beer with you. I don't want you driving me home. I don't want to be buddies.
Yeah.
I want somebody who actually understands stuff and is level-headed and kind of pretends like they know what my life's like, and they're not going to make it any worse.
Exactly. I want to know that the person sitting in the Oval Office is a lot smarter than me. A hell of a lot smarter.
Because if they're not, I might as well just run.
Right, and frankly, that's a job you couldn't give me.
Yeah, I look at what it's done to Obama. I look at the before and after pictures. No thanks. I got enough problems.
I mean, he's still a good-looking man, but that job ages you.
No thanks. And I don't want people calling me at 3:00 in the morning, and let alone me answering it. So let me ask you, I also see in the Wingnut Week in Review that Christie got thrown from the train. Please tell me he went tumbling off the edge, or they just move him to a different car.
He was taking his train back to New York, and I think from New York he just should have hopped a bus to Jersey and stayed there. Even the New York Times is saying it's time to stop running for president and start running your state. This is getting to the point where there are people in this race who are running for the sake of running.
Yeah.
Maybe they're waiting for Donald Trump or Ben Carson to run out of steam or implode. But honestly, right now it's looking like the Republican establishment is down to Rubio, who may be the choice for the GOP, but that could change in another week. Who knows?
Yeah, it's interesting to see, but I just thought it was interesting that Christie got booted and not very happy. Him and his McDonald's strawberry smoothie.
And I've been on Amtrak, and you just don't make a peep in the quiet car. Capital T, capital Q, capital C. It is simply not done.
And I like the fact that they enforced it on somebody who thinks they're entitled to much more than being part of society, and I thought it was a good thing.
Well, yeah, I mean it's classic Christie. It's classic. The rules of decorum, of behavior, etc. don't apply to me.
Yeah.
And like I said in my post, presidential, I don't think so.
Not at all. So let me ask you, next week, what can we look forward to in the coming week? This has been an interesting week. Anything good in the coming week you're keeping an eye on?
I'm keeping an eye on Congress, on the House, on Paul Ryan, the guy who never wanted to be Speaker, who is now. And, Paul Ryan is a lot of things, most of which aren't the things he's promoted as being.
No, the real Paul Ryan will stand up very soon.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, definitely. And he's already bent to bowed to the so-called Freedom Caucus. So this is not going to be a return to any sort of order or sanity in the House. I think he's going to very quickly find himself in the position of that John Boehner was in, where nobody is going to like you and nobody is going to be happy with you, because you're either going to have to say no to your friends or you're going to have to let them muck up the work.
Yep. So the big fun coming up on the horizon, especially watching the end of his political career. Just my thoughts. But I look forward to having you come back again and fill us in on the insanity, the nut ringery. How do you say that? Say it for me.
Wing nuttery.
There we go. Wing nuttery. I'll get it one of these days. Terrence, I appreciate the time, man.
All right. Well, thank you.
Great talking with you. Terrence Heath, Campaign for America's Future, ourfuture.org. You want to take a look at their stuff, just go to ricksmithshow.com, click on Terrence's name, take you right there. Quick break, right back. Stick around. You listen to The Rick Smith Show.
Controversial, thought-provoking, opinionated. Rick Smith.
From Belgrade, Serbia, this is your World in 2 Minutes. I'm your host, Luke Vargas, with the Talk Radio News Service. Make it a double. China has revised its long-standing one-child policy, announcing that parents across the country can now have 2 children. The move is a response to demographic trends in the country that start to look worrisome as time passes. With a growing, aging population and successive generations each outliving the last, China could use an influx of young wage earners to not just pay into social support systems for the elderly, but actually offer that care directly. And with Europe struggling to sort out how to respond to a flood of asylum seekers, the Danish government is arguing that its citizenship should come with some important responsibilities. According to a proposed law, Danish citizens who leave the country to fight with the Islamic State or other overseas terrorist organizations could receive life in prison. That kind of sentence could be triggered by tossing the charge of traitor against any foreign fighters. And let the evictions begin. Over budget, deadly for construction workers, and highly polluted, the 2016 Summer Olympics in Brazil descended to the 4th level of Hades this week, as The Guardian reported the eviction of 385 families, many without compensation, to make way for transport projects associated with the 2-week sporting event. The British outlet reported that families already financially strapped have been hit hard by the evictions, forcing them to move far outside the city. Making matters worse, a number of commuter bus routes used by locals to navigate the metropolis have also been shuttered in the run-up to the Games. The Rio Olympics will run from August 5th to 21st. For more global news headlines, visit talkradionews.com.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we bang. Rick Smith.
We need to stand united, for undivided we shall never fall. Remember all, we need to trust in and then forever call on our brothers and our sisters. And are you and I are win? You and I both know that we can rely on it. The time is prime.
So the Franklin and Marshall poll just out. Latest returns on the presidential campaign have Donald Trump here in Pennsylvania up by 23. Ben Carson 22. Marco Rubio jumping up to 13. On the Democratic side, Hillary 52%, Bernie 18%. So it looks like Pennsylvania deciding already, and widely for Hillary. Up in the air with the Donald, though. I mean, when you and I think Terrence is right. It's very odd that you have 2 people with absolutely no political experience whatsoever. And to me, it goes back to this anti-intellectualism, not understanding. You want people who don't really know how to do the job, that anyone can do it. I hear my friends say, anyone can be a teacher, anyone can be a politician, or there's a learning curve that goes into this. Look, in order to get your way up to some of these positions, you have to know how to be a dog catcher first, I think. The idea that you're going to have someone who has no understanding of how government really works be the leader of the free world and come to it with a business mentality is a little scary. Not saying it's impossible, just a little scary. And I look at Carson and I look at Trump. I don't know. I don't know. It's scary times. Now, do I think that either one of them are going to be the nominee? Well, of course not. I don't believe that at all. But I do think that, in this run-up, and the reason I think that you see so many others hanging around is because nobody else thinks Trump or Carson is going to be the guy. Now has been that what's been tweeted to me and emailed to me is, at this point, in 2008, McCain was pretty far behind. So there's still plenty of time. The question is who's it going to be? Is it going to be Ted Cruz, who did a really kind of funny Glenn Beck bit where he said that climate change is not science, it's religion. That all of the models and all of the the things that they've put forth, all of the scientists, like 95% of them have concluded that this is something that we're contributing to and we need to be working on it. No, we don't believe that. And he goes into this whole rant about how it's religion. That kind of stuff scares me because I sat and I watched it. And look, I believe what the scientists are telling me, but can I prove that climate change is real and that we're doing it? I don't know. I'm not a scientist, but I am someone who goes, do we have the technology to change things? And the answer is yes. Is it a positive policy to burn things and to consume natural resources? No. I mean, so even if you don't believe, even you're not a true believer, and I have some friends who are just, absolute. I'm on the side of the science is what I see and what I've read tell me, that we're doing this. And it's not good. We need to do something. I talk to my friends who are just the absolute deniers that, we couldn't possibly do this. The reality is, we can. We've done a lot of things. And we're not going to destroy the planet as a whole. We're just going to destroy it for us. That's the difference. And that's the part that I don't think we quite understand. Just my thought on it. But, hey, we'll figure it out. Like Rex Tillerson says, we will adapt. You'll just be charged for water and for air and, all that stuff. What do you think? Good, bad? Sad. Anyway, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to talk about the Pennsylvania elections Tuesday. I hope it's on your calendar to get out and vote on November 3rd. 3 big Supreme Court justice seats up on the ballot. Quick break, right back.
Together tonight. Thought-provoking, intelligent conversation with a heart. The voice of the working class, Rick Smith. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to thericksmithshow.com. If you've missed any portion of the program, you can download the podcast at thericksmithshow.com.
You're listening to WIN, Workers Independent News, a production of Diversified Media Enterprises. I'm Doug Cunningham. An historic decision by the NLRB regional director in Tucson, Arizona on the employment status of Tucson taxi drivers means thousands of taxi drivers around the country could be newly eligible for union representation. The Office of Professional Employees International Union assisted the Tucson Hacks Association in winning this ruling. Mel Schwartzwald is OPEIU's general counsel.
We believe it means a great deal not only to these drivers, but to many cab drivers across the country. What the regional director has done is said that taxi cab drivers are really employees rather than independent contractors.
While this could be appealed by the employer, Schwartzwald says that Tucson cab drivers can still move forward.
The next step here would be to have an election to see if they want to be represented by the Tucson Hacks Association. And that should shortly be scheduled by the regional director. It is possible that election could be delayed with an appeal process, but that depends in part on what the employer does. But there should be a vote fairly soon.
The NLRB ruling is the first of its kind for taxi drivers. The Labor Board this year in the FedEx Home Delivery Incorporated decision and the Browning Ferris Industries case has been redefining what constitutes employees versus independent contractors. Workers continue to be on the march at the Port of Long Beach. Long Beach City Councilwoman Lena Gonzalez joined striking port truck drivers on the picket line at Long Beach Container Terminal. Amazon warehouse workers picketed and rallied in Long Beach on Thursday as well. Misclassification of employees as contractors and wage theft are among the main issues in strikes that are continuing at the ports of Long Beach and Los Angeles. UAW GM workers are taking a look at the details of the tentative new labor contract as they prepare to vote on whether or not to ratify it. All the workers will get $8,000 bonuses upon ratification. Traditional higher wage UAW members will get 3% wage raises in the first and third years, 4% lump sums in the second and fourth. Lower wage in progression members will get raises on a path to traditional wages. Workers with 3 or more years at GM will get to the full traditional wage of approximately $29 an hour by the end of this 4-year contract. The UAW says it won $1.9 billion in new investments in U.S. plants on top of the $6.4 billion announced earlier this year. UAW President Dennis Williams says it's up to the workers now to approve or disapprove this deal.
As with every negotiation process, our members makes a final decision, and we look forward to the discussion ahead.
Workers Independent News is brought to you with support from union-owned, union-represented Bank of Labor. Bank of Labor has provided trust and fiduciary services to labor organizations for nearly a century. online at bankoflabor.com.
You've been listening to WIN, Workers Independent News. For more information, visit laborradio.org.
We don't win. Let me give you one quick example. These folks, CNBC, they had it down at 3.5 hours. I just read today in the New York Times, $250,000 for a 30-second ad. I went out and said, it's ridiculous. I could stand up here all night. Nobody wants to watch 3.5 or 3 hours. It was a big sacrifice, and I have to hand it to Ben. We called Ben. He was with me 100%. We called in. We said, that's it. We're not doing it. They lost a lot of money. Everybody said it couldn't be done. Everybody said it was going to be 3 hours, 3.5, including them. And in about 2 minutes, I renegotiated it down to 2 hours so we can get the hell out of here. Not bad. Not bad. And I'll do that with the country. We will make America great again. And thank you, everybody. Just for the record.
When I played my hand, looked like a joker. Turn around, Satan must have woke up. This lady left. She was waiting outside the door.
I gotta tell you, the best thing Donald Trump did, the absolute best thing that came out of the Trump, and we're winning bigly. Thank goodness we didn't have to listen to any more of that. The best part of the entire debate, other than the end, when they rolled the credits. That was, to me, the best portion of it. Anyway, big election November 3rd. Lots of things to decide. 3 Supreme Court candidates, 3 spots to be filled. Never before in the state's history has this happened. Well, right at the very beginning when you started the court, but not since has this been the case. Historic stuff. You're going to want to be a part of it. Put it on the calendar. Little ring around the finger. Remind you, November 3rd, have to vote. But here to talk a little bit about it, our good friend John Neurohr, campaign strategist, brilliant overall guy, and on the ball with this stuff. John, thanks for taking time for us.
It's always good to talk to you, Rick.
So, big election coming up, I hear.
Yeah. Well, I think that's sort of maybe part of the problem. You say that sarcastically, but I think a lot of people are maybe coming around to that in the last couple of weeks in a very serious way.
No, I've been saying this is huge. This could change the direction of this state for the next couple of generations, because come 2020, and I don't think people realize how important the Supreme Court is in redistricting here in Pennsylvania.
Absolutely. They get the final say on what the maps look like. You have, the maps, the way they're drawn now, the way they were drawn after 2010 with Republicans in control, are gerrymandered. We've talked about this before, but the maps are drawn in a way that makes it very difficult for, Democrats to win control of the state House and state Senate. And, that's on purpose. And there are very few toss-up competitive districts anymore in Pennsylvania because of the way that maps are drawn. So, for whichever party has control in 2020 after the census is done and we figure out, who's in control. And so we're talking about the congressional districts, right? But we're also talking about the state House and the state legislative districts.
Yeah, our entire setup, and as I understand it, maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong, but the Supreme Court has a say if the parties can't agree who the swing vote's going to be, who the chairman is. Then the Supreme Court would be the one who steps in and makes that decision, as I understand it.
Exactly. And so it's also about, once they have that commission and the maps are drawn, what the maps look like. If the state Supreme Court can say, well, look, you are, there are certain factors that constitutionally state legislatures have to take into consideration when they're putting these maps together. You can't draw, the districts have to be drawn in a contiguous way. They have to be drawn in a way where you're not boxing in certain minority groups, for example, and putting them into a district where they might be 49% of a district, but not have a majority. Where you're clearly drawing lines to give African Americans in a particular area, for example, one district where they're all drawn into. But then there are 3 other districts in corresponding regions that are close by, where you're basically drawing them out of those districts and making it more difficult for a minority candidate to win and run and win, for example, or what have you. So yes, the Supreme Court in Pennsylvania has the final say on what those maps look like, whether they pass muster or not. And you've had a situation in other states where the state Supreme Courts have become, in essence, the last line of defense for even more terribly gerrymandered maps. That it happened in a number of states after 2010, where you had Republicans who took control of many state legislatures after 2010, and they tried to draw just absurd state legislative and congressional maps that would play to their advantage for the next decade. And you had, in a number of cases, state Supreme Courts that were the last line of defense to block those maps and say, you need to go back to the drawing board. You need to follow the constitutional rules of how you draw maps and do it in a much more fair way.
No, I mean, we had that here in Pennsylvania. I mean, the woman in Allentown. I think we should just scrap the whole thing and just have the woman in Allentown do it in 2020.
Well, there are a couple of states. Off the top of my head, I know that Iowa is one of those states where the state legislatures actually don't draw the maps.
Right.
You have independent commissions. Often what you're talking about is you have political scientists, people who are, for the most part, independent of political parties, who are in charge of drawing maps. And I know that there's a movement in a number of other states to go in that direction. Now, from a partisan perspective, that may play in your favor or play against you depending on who has control of state legislatures. But there's no question that is probably a more fair way to do it. But state Supreme Courts, you would hope, even in a state like Pennsylvania, where you're electing those state Supreme Court justices, and so they have a political party that they're associated with, they have, played that role of a more independent body than, maybe not as independent as an independent commission like in Iowa, but you'd have had, for example, Republican majority state Supreme Courts after 2010 in a couple of places that actually came back to the Republicans in the state legislature and said, look, guys, I mean, we can't even sell this one. You have to go back to the drawing board and redraw these maps. These are ridiculous. So at least on face, the state Supreme Court in the redistricting process, regardless of which party has a majority, should be more of an independent body than the actual state legislatures drawing their own maps.
Yeah, picking their own voters instead of the voters picking them,
Exactly.
which always stuck with me. I got to be honest, I think the focus should not be focused so much on contiguous and continuous and all of that as much as it should be on competitive. I think part of what's going on in this state and the voter disenfranchisement that we see is there's so few really competitive races to where you have people with equal resources going and really pitching ideas and that, or I'm curious your thought.
Well, I think that's absolutely right. I think that in a lot of cases, up and down the ballot, and I would say, the higher up on the ballot you go, the more people feel this way. Does their vote really matter? Does their vote really count? And so in a presidential year, they have some notion that their state is going to go the same way that it has the last 2 or 3 elections every time. Does their vote really matter? You have, senators, for example, who have won re-election over and over and over, regardless of political party, maybe in certain states, and does their vote really matter? So I think that you also have that situation where the maps are drawn in a certain way, where the same state House and state Senate candidates, if they want to keep running, they keep winning. And it's because they've drawn their own maps that way. And the longer that you are there, the more power you have in Harrisburg, the more you can have a say in drawing your own district the way you want. As you put it, you can pick your voters instead of your voters picking you. So I think a lot of people feel that way. And so drawing competitive districts is a really important way to start to allow people to once again feel like their votes count. And in the other situation where I've seen before with campaigns is oftentimes more local elections are competitive, can be competitive. You talk about school boards, for example. And so in that case, I think people feel like their votes count more at that local level sometimes than, their votes count for statewide office, for example.
Yeah, but here's the thing. I mean, why do you have such low turnout in those election years? Because I'm looking at this election, which next Tuesday, November 3rd, is really enormous for this state, and I'm not predicting a huge turnout.
No, I think you're absolutely right. And the way that we started the conversation, where you said, oh, so I hear there's a really important election next week. I really do feel like there are lots of people who I feel like are generally engaged, at least to some degree, in the community, and they vote in on your elections, and I feel like a lot of them are waking up and saying, oh my goodness, they're running ads now during the football game on Sunday, or there is something that's happening and it's important. So it seems that a lot of people are late to the game on this one. Hopefully they can recognize how critically important these state Supreme Court races are. I do think, even though obviously one is state court based and then one is federal court based, some of the more recent decisions of the Supreme Court, the federal Supreme Court, and the massive implications for those decisions over the last year or two, maybe just sort of by osmosis, people are coming to terms with the fact that these high courts are really important. And again, we're talking about two separate court systems, state courts versus federal courts. But in Pennsylvania, when, in the same way that when federally legislation is passed and the Supreme Court gets the final say, when Congress passes bills, the same thing happens here in Pennsylvania.
Right.
And so you have things like Act 13, or think about legislation that could be coming down the pike. A tax on labor, for example, that the state Supreme Court is going to have the final say on things like that. It's really, really important. So maybe some of that, the federal Supreme Court being in the news in the last year or two, will rub off a little bit when people start to recognize the state Supreme Court races that are happening next week.
No, I hope you're right, and I hope people turn out on November 3rd, not November 2nd, not November 4th. Don't let anybody tell you they changed the date or moved it or are special this year. It's the first Tuesday of the month, which just happens to be the 3rd. So make sure that you get out on Tuesday the 3rd to vote. I did want to get your thoughts on the big Senate race coming up next year. We've seen a new player jump into the game, John Fetterman. Along with McGinty and Joe Sestak, who we've had both of them on the program, still working on Fetterman. Some interesting dynamics there, I think.
Well, yeah, it is interesting. I saw maybe about 2 weeks ago, week and a half or 2 weeks ago, there was a public policy polling came out with a poll, and a very well-respected polling firm, by the way, and they came out with a poll that I saw. That was the first time I saw the 3-person Democratic primary. And John Fetterman, mayor of Braddock, somebody that I think folks in Western Pennsylvania have heard of because he's been doing some really innovative stuff in Braddock out here in Western Pennsylvania. His name recognition statewide is not very high. And that's, I think, one of his biggest challenges, raising money and getting name recognition. But he came in at 14% in a poll, in the first poll, in a time when his name recognition is not very high. Now, who knows exactly what that means? We're talking about one poll. But, I think for him, it should be encouraging because, I think it means that if folks might be looking for an alternative. And there's been a lot of talk about, in the poll, Admiral Sestak had 29%, Katie McGinty had 22%, and then you had John Fetterman at 14%, with a lot of undecideds. I think it was 35 or 40% undecided. So
we should get that undecided guy to run.
Well, I think, but it between John Fetterman having low name recognition but still getting 14%, and then you have 35% of people who are undecided. Obviously we have a year to go and people aren't completely tuned in yet. but we're talking about likely Democratic primary voters. We're talking about people that have at least peripherally been paying some attention to this. And it seems like they're looking for some kind of alternative. And you have two folks that are, have good name recognition statewide, especially Admiral Sestak, and they are sort of more of the establishment type candidates. And I think, for me personally, they're very good on a lot of issues. I think either one of them would make great senators. At the same time, there's something happening. There's something going on. Folks are looking for some kind of alternative, I think, maybe. And it could be that you have the two more established candidates that still need to sell themselves and sell their positions to those likely primary voters. At the same time, Admiral Sestak especially has been out there. He's seemingly running for office for a very long time.
Yeah, in fact, he walked all across the state, 422 miles.
I think he's fantastic, but I think that there is some cause for concern in a poll like this for him and for Katie McGinty's folks as well.
Well, could this be what's going on in the Republican Party? I mean, you look at the two leaders of the presidential race over there, and you've got Trump and Carson, who have no political experience whatsoever, and all of the quote-unquote establishment candidates, they've fallen to the rear. That they, the old thought that governors win presidential races, not so much holding true over there.
Yeah, I think the tremendous distrust of government at all levels. And I think we could take hours and hours and hours, and you have, and have a conversation about why that is in reality. But I think just generally speaking, that's the kind of thing that clearly crosses partisan lines. And so, yeah, I think you're absolutely onto something, that being an establishment candidate. I mean, look at Jeb Bush. Is there any better indicator of the being the establishment type candidate being a problem right now than Jeb Bush? I mean, somebody who you talked a couple years ago, I'm sure that Jeb Bush and his strategists and advisors thought he could raise a ton of money, which he has, and basically, walk to the nomination without much problem if it's something that he wanted.
Yeah, and he doesn't look like he wants it.
Clearly not happening.
Yeah, but here again, I've had a couple of people tell me, political insiders who go, you can just listen to him. He didn't want it from the beginning.
I think that there's certainly something to be said for that. I think that the lack of enthusiasm from him at times is partially because he actually is generally a more measured person than some of the other candidates. But at the same time, it's sort of, you feel like, and maybe this isn't the best analogy, but you remember, I think, in 1980, when at one point somebody asked Ted Kennedy, why do you want to be president? And he was unable to answer the question. And that was kind of the beginning of the end.
Yep.
I don't really know how Jeb Bush answers that question right now in an enthusiastic way, in a way that gets people to rally behind him, other than, well, I'm a Bush. That's just sort of what we do.
And that's an answer. That's better. That's the answer maybe Kennedy should have given.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair, because at least it is an answer. That's true.
It may not be a good one, but it's something.
Right.
So let me ask you a last question then. Did you watch the big debate the other night? What was your favorite moment of the whole thing?
Well, I heard what you said. I think the favorite moment was when the credits ran. I have a very difficult time sitting and watching large blocks of time of the debate. So I feel like, I'll watch a few minutes and get infuriated and then flip over to a football game or something. And then maybe I'll come back for a few minutes. But I really do think it's interesting now today that the RNC says, well, we're dropping NBC. We're severing our relationship with NBC when it comes to the debates, because the candidates were so angry about the questions. And when you have a debate that's that long, you have that many candidates on stage, inevitably there are going to be some questions that are weaker than others. But I also think if you go back to the last Democratic debate, the CNN debate, I mean, Anderson Cooper was, he was gloves off and really going at the Democratic candidates on the stage and asking them the same kind of questions that the Republicans on stage were so up in arms about.
Yeah.
Look, I would rather them. ask questions about the issues too, because frankly, the more honest most of the Republican candidates are about their stance on the issue, the less mainstream they become, the more difficult it is for them to win a general election. But at the same time, it's sort of par for the course when you have so many debates. So I don't know. I mean, it's just kind of a circus. It really is.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's what happens when you got 10 people on the stage. I mean, at the end of the day, I still think you should have had the one-to-one debate off, work your way like the Sweet 16, and start cutting people loose. At some point, you got to throw Christie from the train like Amtrak did.
Well, and in the end, the candidates should be mad at the RNC and Reince Priebus, and not at the networks necessarily, because the RNC, they're the ones that negotiated the terms of all these debates. They're the ones that made the decision on, how this was going to play out and how many people were going to be on stage. I mean, if the RNC wanted to do it the way that you were talking about, that they could have had it, right? I mean, because they go to the networks and they say, you either do it this way or you don't get the debate. And the networks would say, fine, or at least negotiate the terms in a different way. So the candidates should be mad at their own party leadership.
Yeah, I don't understand why there was a debate on CNBC myself. That's the Wall Street channel anyway, and I found it interesting that Trump said, "Well, you guys aren't with us anyway." Nonsense! They're with you all the time.
Absolutely. Yeah, I don't quite get that either. But
it just shows you how little we pay attention.
Point. The point about the one thing that seemed to resonate and get all the people in the crowd riled up was anytime you use the buzzword, mainstream media, the liberal media. I mean, that is so tired and ridiculous, and the hypocrisy of them screaming that from the stage at a CNBC debate is just laughable.
Yeah, it's crazy, just crazy, but fun, and that's why we play the game. John, I appreciate you taking some time for us, sharing your insight. Look forward again real soon.
It's always good to talk to you, Rick. Look forward to it again.
Thanks so much, John Newrourke, Democrat, political strategist, just a really bright guy. Quick break, right back. Your thoughts, 1-888-520-RICK.
Disorder in the house. There's a flaw in the system. And the fly in the ointment is going to bring the whole thing down. The floodgates are open. We've let the demons loose. The big guns have spoken, and we've fallen for the ruse.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1986. That was the day that Edward Meese gave a speech to the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. Meese was serving as Attorney General under President Ronald Reagan. During his speech, Meese encouraged bosses to spy on their employees in order to determine if they were using drugs. He said management also has to take responsibility for surveillance of problem areas such as locker rooms, parking lots, shipping and mail room areas, and even the nearby taverns if necessary as part of controlling this problem. He also advocated for drug testing of employees. Ronald Reagan had declared what he termed the war on drugs in 1982. Meese was outlining a plan to make the workplace a battlefront of that war. During his speech, he said, "The workplace is the strategic pass-through which almost all Americans move. Consequently, the workplace can be a choke point on this use or misuse of illegal drugs." After the speech, a spokesman for Meese assured the press that the Attorney General was not advocating for bosses to infringe on the civil liberties of their employees. Many workers and unions have disagreed with that assessment. Since 1987, drug testing by employers has risen more than 250%. In 1987, the National Labor Relations Board ruled that drug testing was a mandatory subject of bargaining. By all accounts, Reagan's war on drugs had little success in stopping drug use. In 2005, 82% of polled police and sheriffs called the war a failure. However, the war on drugs has handed a resounding victory to corporate special interests like drug testing companies and privatized prisons. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com.
Tales of American Political History with Clinton Porter Hackney.
We've been discussing President Grover Cleveland's clandestine cancer surgery done to maintain his strong public image for congressional repeal of the Sherman Act. Doctors Joseph Bryant and W.W. Keene conducted the operation on a yacht, and the removal was done through the open mouth instead of the jaw to avoid any signs of surgery. When all was said and done, one newspaper story appeared about a surgery, but was suppressed by the political machinery of the time. Grover Cleveland died 15 years later, and eventually Dr. Keene published an article detailing the truth. In 1975, the long-stored tumor sample was determined to be malignant. The most important result of the cover-up may have been that Cleveland convened Congress on August 7th, the House repealed the Sherman Act on August 28th, and the Senate did the same on October 1st. Cleveland had achieved his goal, and the economy improved. This is Clinton Porter Hackney at cphackney.com.
Chances are, when you took a shower this morning, an AFSCME member made sure that water was clean. When you drove to work, an AFSCME member maintained the road. When you rode an elevator, an AFSCME member inspected it. I'm David Philman, Executive Director of AFSCME Council 13, the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees. AFSCME members enforce regulations, keep prisoners behind bars, take care of patients, protect the environment, and more. The work isn't glamorous, the salaries aren't high, but AFSCME members serve the public in every aspect of our daily lives. Chances are, you'll never see that AFSCME member working in a sewage plant, diving underwater to repair a bridge, or answering a 911 call. But aren't you glad they do? For more information, visit AFSCME13.org. We are AFSCME.
Just a day job that someone's got to do. It's kinda hard when everyone looks up to you. Try to make it look easy, gonna make it look good, like anybody would. I'm just your average, ordinary, everyday superhero, trying to save the
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. Questions, comments, something on your mind, you can email me, Rick at thericksmithshow.com. Some interesting new polling out after a string of mass shootings and, of course, the political gun control fight that's been going on. Polling, according to the AP and GFK, actually showing that the public coming around to the idea of stronger gun control laws, just reasonable, rational, thoughtful stuff. Not surprisingly, 8 in 10 Democrats favor some measure of sanity with our gun laws, while 6 in 10 Republicans want them left alone or actually loosened, which is kind of bizarre to me, that you would actually, in this day and age, say, you know what, we should, guns everywhere. Just kind of one of those bizarre things. And we're going to take a quick break right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
That's the way we deal with global warming, climate change, or any of those problems. Not through government intervention, not through government taxes.
Government can't wave a magic wand and make that happen. Let the private sector do this.
Republicans pan government action on climate and energy at their third presidential debate.
Special GNR coverage straight ahead. From BradBlog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
Governor Pataki, you've indicated you believe climate change is real and caused at least in part by human activity.
He's a witch. Burn him. This is your Green News Report.
Witch!
Okay, Desi Doyen, is it just my imagination, or are we actually seeing more conversation about climate change coming out in Republican presidential debates? And not to scoff at it, but to actually discuss what to do about it.
Well, it's a start. They don't really talk much about policy, but at least they're not as aggressively denying the science.
Former New York Governor George Pataki came out and actually excoriated the party, said that, yes, climate change is real. He's mad at Republicans for not understanding that. That's a start. Have I set the bar too low?
I believe you have, but hey, that's kind of where we are with today's Republican Party.
Plus, he was in the undercard kiddie table debate, so no one really saw that. So there's that.
Yes, at the third Republican presidential primary debate, both the main and the junior debate in Boulder, Colorado on Wednesday, debate host CNBC said they were going to focus on economic issues. And although one of the fastest growing sectors of the economy is clean energy, CNBC only briefly mentioned energy and climate change. In the so-called undercard debate, as you mentioned, former New York Governor George Pataki broke ranks and criticized the anti-science stance of most of his party.
One of the things that troubles me about the Republican Party is too often we question science that everyone accepts. I want Republicans to embrace innovation and technology. We could have far more clean energy. We can have next generation nuclear, thorium reactors that have no risk of meltdown. We can have solar panels on every home, R&D credits, let the private sector do this. We can export those technologies to places like China.
Now, Pataki was the only one to discuss really any kind of policy or expansion of clean energy. He echoes the policies of Democratic presidential candidates about accelerating clean energy investment and exporting that technology to the rest of the world, but he didn't have any real solutions for actually reducing emissions that cause climate change.
Yeah, there was some question about what will you do about climate change, and then they go on to talk about how we have to have as much energy as possible and never actually talk about reducing carbon emissions. New Jersey Governor Chris Christie in the main debate offered a similar take.
We've laid out a national energy plan that says that we should invest in all types of energy. We need to make sure that we do everything we can across all kinds of energy. Natural gas, oil, absolutely. But also where it's affordable, solar, wind in Iowa has become very affordable and it makes sense. That's the way we deal with global warming, climate change, or any of those problems. Not through government intervention, not through government taxes.
Yes, well, wind in Iowa has become very affordable thanks to government tax credits. Not sure how more development of oil helps climate change.
That's right, it doesn't. Now, notice that Pataki and the other candidates advocate waiting for the private sector to get around to this. But the fact is that government research funding has been the main driver behind pretty much all tech innovation, from the internet to cell phones to fracking.
To oil and coal production for decades.
Exactly. And although he criticized the role of government policy, Governor Chris Christie took credit for New Jersey ranking third in the nation for solar installations. That's correct, but it wasn't a private sector miracle. That was thanks to government policies put in place by previous administrations.
Exactly. He actually pulled out of a regional greenhouse gas initiative. So it's fun that he's taking credit for what he didn't do.
And also note that for some reason, the other candidates kept completely silent and did not jump in to add their 2 cents for this.
Go figure.
No discussion of the UN climate talks either, which the next president will have to deal with. So we got basically the same Republican Party talking points, more oil and gas drilling, and no matter what their position on climate change, all of the Republican presidential candidates all agree we should make sure the government does nothing on climate. And although this CNBC debate was focused on economic issues, another thing CNBC did not cover was that this week, more major corporations have signed on to climate action. The White House announced on Monday that 81 more big corporations have signed on to support President Obama's Clean Power Plan.
So corporations, the private sector, is coming on board with what Barack Obama is doing. This debate on CNBC was supposedly about your money, your economy. Nobody talked about that. No questions were raised about that. The economy goes on. The fight against climate change goes on, as if it never occurred in the Republican Party and even on CNBC.
Yep.
For much more on our coverage today and the stories we couldn't get to, thanks to the Republicans and their debate and CNBC, check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
Sounds of silence.
The most important issues of the day. This is the Rick Smith Show.
So I understand yesterday Bernie Sanders met with the vice president over at the Naval Observatory for about an hour there in the VP's residence. Kind of wonder what they're talking about. Maybe Joe Biden as VP with Bernie Sanders. Who knows? Stranger things probably could have possibly happened. Just doubt it. Highly doubt it. But anyway, let's find out what's going on in Washington, D.C. and around the world. Ellen Ratner, Talk Radio News Service. Ellen, thanks for taking time for us.
Well, thank you so much.
So Bernie has a one-on-one with Joe Biden.
Well, it's interesting because a lot of people think Joe Biden is going to win, and a lot of people want him to win. I love Joe Biden. Did I say Joe Biden? I mean Bernie Sanders. But Hillary Clinton just got the endorsement from Joe de Blasio. She's really racking up, I think we talked about yesterday, the superdelegates. And this is, I think it's a done deal at this point. She's overcome objections, and she will be the nominee. Yeah, I mean, as much as I like Bernie Sanders, and that's my hope, while the heart says, yeah, it's still a fight, and Bernie can do it, the head's going, I'm seeing the same things you are, that you're wrapping up the superdelegates, and the Benghazi thing, I think actually went in her favor. I do too, actually. And I think, Joe Biden. He looks presidential. Exactly. I thought Biden thought if she would have tanked, or, maybe his moment would have been there. So there you go. Right. Exactly. All right. And he decided not to run, and she just decided to do cleanup. And now you get to have what we saw on Wednesday night, the cage match, if you will. Oh, my gosh. Well, one thing that's very interesting is Priebus, who is the RNC chair, has decided to have no more contact with NBC. There's supposed to be a debate. I think it's February 26th. But now they're going to give it to a Republican group. They're going to give it to the National Review. It is February 26th. I'm just looking at my notes. And so there you have it. It's a done deal as well. Now, I think Mr. Priebus did this because Republicans are meeting and did not invite the Republican National Committee this weekend in Washington to talk about debates and what's called forums. Yeah. What do you think of having a forum, I guess the first ever U.S. presidential candidate forum that I guess ever held abroad, being held in Jerusalem on the November 2nd through the 4th. What do you think of that? Well, it will be very interesting. As you know, first of all, there are a lot of Americans in Israel, and there are a lot of people who vote in Israel who have dual citizenship or who are Americans living in Israel. So why am I not surprised? Yeah, well, I mean, it's going to be interesting to see what they say about foreign policy. There's a group called Republicans Abroad, and there's a group called Democrats Abroad. Yeah, I'm just and my question was, when someone emailed me this asking me what my thoughts were, I go, is it for all candidates or just for Republicans? Well, again, Republicans want to show their support for Israel, and a lot of that has to do with the evangelical coming that Jesus will make a second appearance, and that's why Israel needs to be in the hands of Jews or Christians and not in the hands of Muslims. I mean, I think that's their thought process. So I'm assuming then, with that in mind, you'll see Huckabee and you'll see Rick Santorum. You'll definitely see some of the loony right. That's correct. Maybe not Hillary. I don't know. I think Hillary doesn't need to get into that. She doesn't need to get into that. Although, I have to tell you, my friend Terry McAuliffe is the governor of Virginia, and I now call him Governor Terry instead of Terry. And I just went up to him and I said, how could you? And he knows exactly where I stand on the death penalty. And she now says she's not opposed to it. I don't even know how to talk about it. Yeah, I'm with you. Again, but isn't that one of the knocks against Hillary, though? That it's that finger in the wind kind of thing that that Bill was accused of, and in a lot of instances, followed. It's you put the finger in the wind, and whichever it's blowing. Well, as you know, right before when he was running for president, President Clinton executed as Governor Clinton, Ricky Lee Rector, and the guy was so mentally disturbed or ill, or he had a brain disturbance, I don't know exactly what was wrong with him, that he was offered his, last supper, his sandwich or whatever. And he said, oh, I'll come back and eat it after the execution. Oh, man. Wow. I mean, so there you have it. Yeah, but you also didn't want to have another Mike Dukakis moment either. So, yeah, and that's one of those political things where you've got to do those kind of bizarre things to at least look tough on crime. Right. I know. I understand.
Yeah, and he did. I
Uh,
mean, I blame a lot of the police interaction with citizens on Clinton because of it. We're going to put 100,000 more cops in the street and crack down zero tolerance policies, all of that stuff. And we've created a militant police force.
Well, we have, and I think we're going to see more and more of those YouTube type videos come out about things
Yeah.
as people get empowered to take more pictures.
I'm with you. I look at that one in South Carolina, the teenage girl being flipped over and thrown across the room by one of the resource officers. And I'm going, really? I think that's a bit abusive just in my thought.
Absolutely, and it was taken by another student, and I think officers need to realize people are going to have phones now. You got to be careful.
Yeah. Or just don't be that. Treat people.
Well, right.
Yeah, it just is what it is.
Yeah, don't go overboard. You're an officer of the law. You're not a thug.
No, I mean, I remember growing up in the projects in Cleveland, and I remember seeing an awful lot of things that didn't happen the way it was claimed by authorities.
Right.
And they got away with it because there was nothing there. And we're seeing a lot of this stuff. I mean, there are a lot of police-involved shootings to where, sorry, nobody was running you over. You didn't have to put 2 bullets in the guy's head because you believed he was running you over.
Right.
Just my thought.
Exactly.
Let's move along. I guess there's some new stuff on the FEC and crowdfunding, some new rules.
Well, that's right. So Mary Jo White, she used to be a prosecutor. She's now head of the Security and Exchange Commission. They came out with these crowdfunding things. People were just giving money and not getting much back. Now you're going to be able to get shares. There's either going to be a budget and entire prospectus on the internet, or they can use a registered kind of portal for it. But now you can put in 10% of your income or your net worth, whichever is less. And they are expecting that these crowdfunding sources can get up to $1 million a year total. So this is very new, and it's the first time it's been regulated. Otherwise, it's just been on the internet, and people have gotten nothing back.
Yeah, no,
but
don't you think? But don't you think, Ellen, that people who donate to these things, who spend money in these crowdfunding sources, to the one that pops into my head, a guy had a beach cooler that had like a radio and all kind of stuff in it that he wanted money to start up, and if you donated money, you'd be able to at some point buy this nifty cooler. And I think you spent the money on it because you thought, well, I'm not going to get anything back, but I'd like to buy the nifty cooler.
Right. Well, that's exactly why people are doing that kind of thing. But this is to be a little more direct about it and to give people real options.
Okay. I'm not against it. I saw some scary news today. I guess we're sending some troops into Syria, about 50. Is that true?
About 50, we won't say. All we'll say is that it's 50 or less. They won't be in a combat job,
I'd hope not.
but they are going to be advising there. They're going to be helping these groups that are anti-ISIS, but they're also anti-government. That's our answer to Russia.
Yeah, I gotta imagine there's some pushback because I'm going 50. Are you kidding me? What's that going to do?
Right. Exactly. That is just 50 is not going to do much of anything for sure.
To me, if sending in 50 is only stirring up the hornet's nest.
That's right.
Okay, I just want to make sure that I'm getting this right because I
No,
don't want to
you're
go off and.
absolutely getting it right. But don't forget, Russia bombed some areas that were not ISIS and were really pro-government or anti-government forces.
Right.
So that's kind of interesting.
Yeah, I mean, it looks like, and I said this, a couple of years ago, we're back to that Cold War stance almost with Putin.
Well, it's interesting that a government official was asked, isn't this again, the Cold War? And he said, well, they're not a superpower anymore, so it's not a Cold War. Hello?
I'm sorry, but behind us, who has the most nuclear weapons?
That's exactly what I was going to say. How about their store of enough to kill us many, many times over?
Maybe I missed that, but I consider somebody who has, a couple thousand nuclear weapons, I would consider them a superpower, even if they don't have a whole bunch of money.
Right, I would too. And they may not be the richest country in the world anymore. They may not be a quote unquote superpower, but they're pretty powerful for me.
Yeah, I mean who said that? Who would be? And if
I don't remember who said it. Was a government official, and it was this morning that I honed in on it, and unfortunately, I don't have my memory.
There is someone who should be unemployed tomorrow.
I'm sure.
And I'm not a big fan of firing people, but that's one of those fireable offenses.
Absolutely.
Let's move. I guess there's a budget deal.
There is a budget deal. It was decided at about 3:00 in the morning, so everybody could get home to be with their kids and grandkids for Halloween, I guess.
All right, good.
And it now extends the budget for 2 years, but extends the debt ceiling until March 2017. So that's a year from March.
Good. We're going to pay our bills, and it's not going to be a campaign issue next year. Paul Ryan, good for him.
That's exactly right. This is, and as you know, there were two Republican senators, of course, Mr. Cruz and Rand Paul, who tried to filibuster it. But, filibusters can only go for a few hours.
Right.
If you got the 60 votes necessary to close off debate, good luck with your filibuster.
I say let them talk until they can't talk anymore, because then we don't have to listen to them about anything else.
Ha!
Just my
well,
thought.
They used to even read cookbooks on the floor.
I'm okay with that, just as long as you can hold the floor. Get yourself a bottle, do whatever you got to do, but keep talking, buddy.
Exactly.
all in
that's
favor
what
of
they
it.
tried to do, but they didn't. They at 3:00 in the morning it was passed.
Yeah, well, nobody was listening then. They probably got tired. Last question, last one. I guess 56% of the people think that clerks should do their jobs, huh?
That's right. This was actually a poll. Should clerks have to issue marriage license even if it was against their religious beliefs? 56% of the U.S. population thinks they should, so it is more than a majority.
And what's wrong with the other 44%? I'm going to pay you to not do your job?
I guess so.
All right. Well, there
I
you
guess
go.
they decide they're more important than the Supreme Court of the United States.
Yeah, good stuff. Good stuff, Ellen. I appreciate you taking time for us.
Thank you. Have a great weekend. Happy Halloween.
Thank you. You as well. Thanks so much, Ellen. Ellen Ratner, Talk Radio News Service. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
Radio of, for, and by we the working people. The Rick Smith Show.
Good news about obesity. A new scientific organization is coming to grips with this bulging national problem. Called the Global Energy Balance Network, it comes at obesity from a unique perspective, namely that the key to controlling one's weight is not cutting back on calorie consumption, but committing to a regular program of exercise. Great, huh? You can literally have your cake and eat it too. Before you swallow GEBN's approach, however, note that nearly all scientists on the obesity beat say the opposite. Exercise is a minimal contributor to weight loss compared to putting fewer calories in the tank. So what's behind the contrarian new group? Coca-Cola. Yes, Global Energy Balance Network was created and is financed by the world's leading purveyor of sugary sodas. And Coke is also the leading purveyor of empty calorie science, trying to convince us that its bottled bombs of obesity have no bad effects on human health. The corporate giant's latest scientific fraud is prompted by corporate panic. Sales of full-calorie sodas have plummeted by 25% in the past 2 decades as public health campaigns have ratcheted up to warn of cola's dangers. Consequently, obesity rates, especially for young children, are down, and Coca-Cola now lists obesity concerns by the public as the #1 threat to its business. The choice between your health and the health of their corporate profits is an easy decision for Coke's top executives. So they're trying this trick play to shift the obesity blame from their calories to your lack of exercise. This is Jim Hightower saying, next they'll be promoting the Coca-Cola workout plan. Do several repetitions of 12-ounce elbow bends each day with cans of Coca-Cola, and keep your heart strong by briskly striding to the fridge to grab each can. Remember, every repetition adds up.
Hightower's commentaries are brought to you by the Hightower Lowdown. the monthly newsletter with Hightower's populist take on what the powers that be are up to. Find out more at hightowerlowdown.org.
From Belgrade, Serbia, this is your World in 2 Minutes. I'm your host, Luke Vargas, with the Talk Radio News Service. Make it a double. China has revised its long-standing one-child policy, announcing that parents across the country can now have 2 children. The move is a response to demographic trends in the country that start to look worrisome as time passes. With a growing, aging population and successive generations each outliving the last, China could use an influx of young wage earners to not just pay into social support systems for the elderly, but actually offer that care directly. And with Europe struggling to sort out how to respond to a flood of asylum seekers, the Danish government is arguing that its citizenship should come with some important responsibilities. According to a proposed law, Danish citizens who leave the country to fight with the Islamic State or other overseas terrorist organizations could receive life in prison. That kind of sentence could be triggered by tossing the charge of traitor against any foreign fighters. And let the evictions begin. Over budget, deadly for construction workers, and highly polluted, the 2016 Summer Olympics in Brazil descended to the 4th level of Hades this week, as The Guardian reported the eviction of 385 families, many without compensation, to make way for transport projects associated with the 2-week sporting event. The British outlet reported that families already financially strapped have been hit hard by the evictions, forcing them to move far outside the city. Making matters worse, a number of commuter bus routes used by locals to navigate the metropolis have also been shuttered in the run-up to the Games. The Rio Olympics will run from August 5th to 21st. For more global news headlines, visit talkradionews.com.
Would you dive 14 feet deep in the Susquehanna to keep a bridge safe? Would you spend night after night with prisoners to keep your community safe? Would you spend Christmas Eve plowing snow to keep roads safe? AFSCME members do. Men and women who choose to serve in public service. Mine inspectors, 911 dispatchers, healthcare workers, parole agents. You may not think about them, but no, they're all thinking about you. This message brought to you by AFSCME Council 13.
These are words you should tell the truth. You're lying, now we got the proof. Where you gonna run to? Where you gonna hide? You're running for the door now. No one's getting out alive.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. If you've missed any portion of the program, thericksmithshow.com is where you go to get the podcast. The Rick Smith Show app on the smartphone. Take the program on the go wherever you go. And as always, you can email me, Rick, at thericksmithshow.com. You know, today we spent a lot of time talking about the retirement. And look, so many people that I know don't have retirement security. When you look at this obscene, and I got a bunch of email from folks basically questioning whether it's true. There's no way, it's outrageous that anyone would have $234 million in a retirement account while 80% of the employees have nothing. You know, when you've got, well, actually more than that, you've got 537,000 employees and less than 9,000 of them have a dollar in a retirement account. That's a problem. That is seriously a problem. And you know, it tells you there's something wrong with your model. There's something wrong with what we've allowed to happen in this country, which is really the employment class dictating the rules of what happens in our country. And when you look at, and I know I'm going to get some pushback from people, well, you know, the free market has dictated that these people don't have skills. Nonsense. Understand, the free market back in 100 years ago dictated that working in a factory or working in a coal mine or driving a truck or any of that stuff, building bridges, building whatever, all of that stuff was below worth a living wage. That's what the free market decided. You had a desperation class of people. Unfortunately, working people are easily put into desperation. It's only when they come together and say, you know what? we're not going to do that. We're going to fold our arms and I've said this in many, many other programs. The only power that workers have is the power to fold their arms and say, we're not doing it. And to be able to support each other during those moments. What's happened masterfully, and I look at this presidential race, the fact that not even the Democrats mentioned the word union, that to me is troublesome. The one thing I gave Obama credit for is that, that was part of his campaign, that he talked about reviving the labor movement, reviving the ability to bargain collectively, and actually talked about, hey, join a union. That is a huge step for a president. Now, and honestly and truthfully, hasn't done an awful lot to push that forward. But understand, you've got a recalcitrant Congress who he can't get anything through. Which leads it back to, it comes down to us. We've got to be the ones who are demanding better than what happened on Wednesday night. Are you kidding me? That's the best we can do? The best and the brightest in this nation stood on that stage for 2 hours and railed against people who are on their side. Very bizarre to me. And the hope is that we begin to demand better. But I'd love to hear your thoughts, your questions, your comments. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. I do answer all emails personally. Hope you have a great weekend. Thanks for being here. And like I said, if you missed any portion of the program, ricksmithshow.com. That's where you go get the podcast, listen to the interviews, all of that stuff. Thanks so much. Hope you have a healthy, safe, happy weekend. And get out there and do a little trick-or-treating as well. See you back here on Monday.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Together, we can make America better. Email rick@thericksmithshow.com or interact with us anytime at thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
It's covered like time flood beneath the lunar sway. Imperial mysterious.